The shoulder cam. That's right. I think it's cool, like, overlay for, like, the intro. At least you can tell I'm here, I guess. I thought at one time I might use it like a, I used to do a lot longer streams, and there were times like I would have to cut out and take care of something personally, but like just play music and have it like a background thing. But it kind of made it into my intro. I like it. And I really like the, how the voice modulation is like tied to those, like the line graph or the bar graph, in a circle there. So you can, obviously I'm talking and engaging, and then you can see me sitting here. I don't know. I think it's probably one of the coolest things I've set up. There's supposed to be, the only thing it's missing is this. This is supposed to come on when I first start it, the starting soon, but when I do the outro, it's not supposed to be there. This and the timer. That way you know if the show's starting or ending. But the timer's broke on it or something. I'm thinking about becoming a Doge analyst. Trying out some time in DC. I hear that's a good job to have. Plus, I can't tell you, I like having an intro, like stream starting. Like, if I was bigger, it would probably be a little bit longer. Mine could probably stand to be shorter, but I fucking hate when I start a show and I'm like 10 minutes into a topic, somebody's like, I just got the notification. Like, I hate seeing that. What'd you say? Can you go back? Holy shit! There's a big ass spider web on my. I was checking my security camera because I got an alert that there's motion on the security camera, and I switched over to it, and there's like a gigantic fucking spider web, like a huge fucking spider web across. It scared the shit out of me. All right, here we go.
Hey daddies, it's me, the Linda Binda from TikTok. I wanted to make this video because I wanted to thank you for watching Cold Beer Confessionals with Will Bird. I think that's just incredible. I've watched a few episodes and I'm just like very intrigued. But you know what I'm most intrigued in is Big Daddy's meat stick. I heard that it's very thick, like a good old German sausage. You know, Linda and her coochie loves that. Oh, never mind. Let's not go there. Anyways, I hope you have a good show and enjoy it as you can. There's a lot of weird things that go on, especially when it comes from the realm of Linda Bindaland. So, enjoy the show. Thanks for watching. Peace out.
Welcome everybody. I'm Will Bird, and this is the Cold Beer Confessional. Thank you for joining us. Appreciate you guys being here. A little bit of a late start, but it's debate season, folks. By the way, if you want to support the show, I'm really bad at saying this. If you want to support the show, go to coldbeer.fund. We could use your support to keep the show going, and greatly appreciate all the support that comes in, whether it's just watching, sharing, liking, or financially. Greatly appreciate that. Thank you. It is debate season. So earlier today, first of all, people that are giving Trump praise for coloring with children, you know they speak and understand on the same level, right? Except he uses adult words. He's like, I got the green. And they're like, oh, I like green.
I got this green. I will. Come on. Well, you did a good job.
Like I expect him to get along with children, to understand children to understand him. The problem is when he deals with world leaders. I don't think anybody's ever accused him in public, at least. I wouldn't leave my kids alone with him, but in public, that he can communicate with children. I don't think that's ever been an accusation.
Well, you did a good job. Man, I'll do it. I'll sign all of them. I got this green.
Oh, dude, so there was a couple really good smoke sessions cooked. One of them was the White House tweeted out a picture of Donald Trump at the Resolute desk holding that picture of the MS-13 tattoo that was fake. And then the other one showed Abrego Garcia in his like dress shirt where he met with the senator. And it said, "We are not the same." The White House tweeted that out. And all the comments were filled with, yeah. One is a 34-time convicted felon. And the other is a father from Maryland. There were so many good ones. And then this one from, let's see, it was from Democrats. I don't know what was playing in the background. I don't care. It was from the @Democrat. It's this one right here. So the @Democrats account tweets out, let's get to the top one. It says, @Pete Hegseth needs to go. Pete Hegseth responds and says, your agenda is illegals, trans, DEI, all of which are no longer allowed at DOD. And then they just tweeted out this image that said @Pete, or it's Pete's point of view, where he's drunk texting because his second, let me say this again, his second leaked Signal chat came out. And basically everybody is like jumping from a fleeing ship trying to get away from the DOD. But yeah, this is a pretty good burn. That was very good. Hilarious. Fucking hilarious. Anyways, so if we go over to Pisco, I don't know if you guys personally know him, but I've covered him quite a bit. It's @PiscoLitty on Twitter. He is he's a streamer. He's known to stream with Destiny occasionally. He's also a lawyer. That's why it's Pisco Liddy, like litigation. And he tweets out today, he's been very involved in the Abrego Garcia thing, and why it's wrong and how he didn't get due process, blah, 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 or whatever, right? So he tweets this out, and it says, a list of conservative influencers who won't debate the Trump regime foreign gulag policy. Kilmar et al. So all the people, he's not just Kilmar, but the fact that we are deporting people without ever seeing a judge and sending them to a foreign prison for an unknown reason, unknown charges. They're not being convicted of a crime, nothing, right? So he tweets this out and tags Charlie Kirk, Tim Cass, Law Self-Defense, Benny Johnson, Jack Posobiec, Ben Shapiro, Will Chamberlain, Stool Presidente, Tom Fitton, and J.D. Vance. And he says they are scared. So Will Chamberlain, Jack Posobiec too, but for sure, but Will Chamberlain responds. And this is his response. It says, no, you just haven't earned it. You have been obnoxious and insulting, and your platform is minuscule, not worth my time, not worth rewarding your obnoxiousness. If you want me to come on your stream, now listen, this is very important. If you want me to come on your stream, no, Will Chamberlain, not Wilt's, on your stream, whose stream? Your stream. You can donate $10,000 to Wounded Warriors. A cheaper option is just use the reply button, as I've laid most of my arguments on X in detail. For example, here's a thread where catch Abrego Garcia's lawyer spewing blatant falsehoods, one that you've parroted. And then he tags a thread, okay? So if you want me to come on your stream, donate $10,000. Now, I don't know if Pisco has $10,000. Maybe he does laying around, or maybe this guy's fucking lying, like that person that was going to bet me. There was a person back during last summer. It might have even been earlier than that, like April, like this time last year, that hit me up on Telegram and said that they wanted to bet me that we would not use machines, election machines, voting machines in the current election for president, which was the 2024 election. I told them, they said they knew this for a fact because they had somebody inside Trump's administration in his re-election campaign. So I said, well, if you have insider knowledge, bet me 10-1 odds. Okay? And they said, bet. So I said $10,000. And they said, well, you can't crowdfund it and you can't get GoFundMe and you have to delete your account. And I said, bet. A bet. Done. $10,000, 10-1 odds. And they accepted that bet, allegedly. Then they claimed that they backed out because I was a liar, and they sent their lawyer to my house, and the lawyer said that they knocked, but I wouldn't answer my door, and all this stupid shit. But literally, at the time they wanted to bet me, early voting had already started. People had already voted on machines. People had already voted on me, like they had already lost the bet at the time they floated the bet to me. It was crazy. But anyways, that's neither here nor there. So Will Chamberlain says 10K, and I'll speak to you about this. Now, I don't know if Pisco has 10K or not, probably. I don't, but I guess he does. So then Destiny comes in. So Destiny comes in and says, I'll pay the 10K. Let's go to Destiny's page. The omni-liberal Destiny makes a post. Not that one. Okay, it says, hi, Will Chamberlain. I'll donate the 10K to the Wounded Warriors if you agree to debate for 2.5 hours on these topics. You two can agree on the specifics for it, and I'll give final approval and send you proof of donation. Okay? I'll give final approval and give and send proof of donation. And Will says, great, that was simple. Great, that was simple. Now, somehow, out of all of this, Tim Pool volunteers himself. So they're trying to set up the debate. They're trying to go back and forth. There was like certain topics listed about how this is bad or whatever. And then Tim Pool grabs it from Will's tweet that says, okay, Pisco Liddy, what do you want to argue about? Now, he's just retweeting Destiny saying, I'll pay. Pisco says, I want to argue the following propositions. 1, the deportation of Kilmar Abrego Garcia was illegal. 2, Trump could get him back if he wanted. 3, the Trump administration has a legal responsibility to try and facilitate his release from custody in El Salvador and should do so. Okay? So they were setting debates. Now, Tim Pool, for no reason, he wasn't involved in this in any way, shape, or form, inserts himself and says, Culture War Live, let's do it. So he wants to host it. So Tim Pool wants to host this debate. He'll be getting views. He'll be getting super chats. He'll be making money. There'll be ads running. Of course he wants to host. I'd fucking host it, right? Of course he wants to host it. But he has no dog in this. Destiny's paying for it. Pisco's debating and Will's debating. He has no dog in this race. Okay? So Destiny comes back and says, I don't mind sponsoring a debate between Will Chamberlain and Pisco Liddy. But there is no worlds where I pay to host it on a Russian propaganda platform. Again, Tim Pool was paid by the Russians. Pisco can either have it for his stream, or Will can do a show. Both of those people both have their own shows. Why would we go to Tim Pool to do it? Put it on Pisco's show or Will's show. But if Tim wants it, he can pay for it with his Russian money. Right? So then Will comes in because Will's friends with Tim Pool and says, that's a new condition and looks a lot like welching, frankly. So Destiny says, quote, then I'll give final approval, which was in his original post. It says, then I'll give final approval and send you proof of donation. So he says, quote, then I'll give final approval. It says, you are insane if you think I'd pay $10K to have someone else host the show. Either you or Pisco can host it. I'd never pay for some other person to profit off of it. How stupid would that be? But Tim Pool, not to be outdone, of course, says, first of all, he responds to Pisco calling him out as well and says, I host a weekly debate show. Your post is fake and gay. That, I don't know, trying to be edgy. Tim Pool, not to be outdone, says, ha ha, he's backing out. Backing out of what? He said he'd pay for them two to debate. He doesn't want it on your platform. He's not debating. And he's not saying that he won't pay. He's just saying he don't want you, specifically you, to benefit from it because of the work you've done to the Russians. So Destiny says, what am I getting cold feet on? I'm available to debate any conservative on any topic of this admin at any point in time. You lot are the cowards. And then, of course, Tim Pool, not to be outdone, has to have something to do with it, just like the Russians. Says, I'll donate $10K to Wounded Warriors, and I'll donate another $10,000 to T2T. Destiny getting cold feet shouldn't negatively affect those in need. Tunnel to Towers is T2T. So apparently Tim Pool's going to be hosting the debate, I guess, and Destiny's not paying for it. I wouldn't pay for it either if Tim Pool was going to fucking host it. That's ridiculous. What the fuck? Where did Tim Pool come from, and what the fuck does he have to do with this? It's just like Milo's cat right here. I'm adding $10,000 to the reward for safe return of Milo's cat. Tim Pool tweets out the most unhinged things, and if anybody says anything about it, he's like, duh, you liberals will fall for anything. I don't know. I don't know what Tim Pool. I fucking hate Tim Pool with a passion so much. I hate Tim Pool so much. Here we go. Here's him. So this Joe Rogan clip is going viral. Finally, Joe Rogan has spoken up about the due process. Listen to the clip.
About due process. No, fuck that. But here's the problem with fuck that. The problem with things that are going in a radical direction, and then there's an overcorrection. So the overcorrection is lack of due process. The overcorrection is like round them all up, ship them to jail. Like that's like some things that you say when you're not thinking things through. Like, what do you do about all the criminals? Take them all, fucking send them to El Salvador.
Yeah.
What about due process? No, fuck that. But here's the problem with fuck that. What if you are an enemy of, let's not say any current president. Let's pretend we got a new president, totally new guy in 2020.
Okay.
And this is a common practice now of just rounding up gang members with no due process and shipping them to El Salvador. You're a gang member. No, I'm not. Prove it. What? I got to go to court. No, no due process.
That's dangerous, Joe.
That's dangerous. That's dangerous. That's dangerous.
So Tim says Joe is wrong. Democrats created false criminal charges against Trump and his supporters. J6ers were denied due process, and Trump's lawyers were arrested. What J6er was denied due process? They literally all went to fucking court. All of them went to court.
We got to be careful that we don't become monsters while we're fighting monsters. I think due process exists for a reason, and the reason is it is horrific for someone to be accused of something they didn't do, be imprisoned for crimes they didn't commit, and then live in a cell, live in a cage with a bunch of
people who did commit shit.
Here it is, Benjamin Franklin. It's better 100 guilty persons should escape than one innocent person should suffer. That is wisdom that has survived hundreds of years.
He was tagged to debate Pisco, not to host the debate between someone else. He wants it for the clicks, he wants it for the money, and he wants it to be 2-on-1.
Incredibly accurate, and it is the foundation of freedom. Like, we have to make sure that these people are actually guilty, otherwise we become monsters. You can't, like, what is that? When you fight monsters, be careful that you don't become one.
Become one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's very important. It's very important. You know, you can't.
Joe Rogan back to making sense again, finally. Like, I don't know. He tweets out the craziest shit sometimes. After Democrats started arresting Trump lawyers, the gloves were off. But you know what? They weren't arrested for representing Trump. They were arrested for the criminal acts they committed. They burned the Constitution in order to steal power and lost. Trump must crush the deep state betrayers or the U.S. is lost. He did help Trump a lot. A lot. And his cronies jumped on board too, like Theo Vaughn and Bert Kreischer and Tom Segura. All those jumped on board to like do the same thing. Hell, they were all at the fucking inauguration and then wanted to talk about how weird it was because everybody was like allegiant to Trump. Motherfuckers, you were too. That's the reason you were there. You wouldn't have been invited without your allegiance to Trump. That's the only reason that you were invited. There was another clip. There was another really good clip of the Joe Rogan podcast. Who was the guy that came on? Hold on. The guy that came on and called them all out. It was this one. We can't watch the whole podcast. How much is it? It's only 8 minutes. This guy basically calls them out for the dangers of, like, Joe's having on and just having people, asking people questions. And that's one thing. But the legitimacy that he gives to these people when they're clearly not experts, they won't go out. So, like, let's say we're talking on Winston Churchill. The guy that comes out and talks about Winston Churchill being the actual enemy of World War II, and we didn't actually win World War II, we lost because the Germans were more traditional or some shit. That guy won't debate people that are experts on Winston Churchill. Instead, he goes on like Tucker Carlson's podcast and Joe Rogan's podcast, and it's an air of legitimacy, and people believe him more now that they've seen him on places like Joe Rogan and Tucker Carlson. And it's dangerous, and there's got to be a way to combat that. You can't. They need to face public scrutiny and debates. I'm not saying we should silence people either, but at some point you got to be like, okay, well, you claim to be the biggest guy anti this, and this is the biggest guy talking pro this. You guys should at least hash it out.
He's not doing a podcast like talking to people.
Okay, nor is he doing scholarly work.
And Ian Carroll is another one. Ian Carroll is a big conspiracy theorist. He started doing who owns all the groceries in the grocery store, and he's hardcore on the Jews now. Ian Carroll was on Joe Rogan, or is going to be on Joe Rogan, something.
Or is he working in the archives? Clearly, come on. I mean, he is not the historian of our era.
He's not claiming to be.
This is the thing, Joe. This is like punching jelly.
No, but you don't consume his work.
Well, I'm saying because I don't need to consume endless versions of a revisionist history. I understand.
But it's not revisionist history. If you listen to his work, it's not revisionist history. He's basing it on historical work.
Yeah, I know, but okay, so this is my point about jelly. It's a shape-shifting thing. Comedian or historian?
He's not a comedian.
Historian or podcast? Would-be historian or actual historian? You say he doesn't claim to be a historian, but he's pumping out tens of hours of
Neither
history.
does Dan Carlin. He doesn't claim to be a historian either.
You see my point about the move? It's like some weird jiu-jitsu move where you say, hang on,
Ian Carroll is a super fucking anti-Jewish piece of shit, basically.
All about this as well. You say, I'm not a historian, but I'm going to spend my time talking about history. I'm not a journalist, but I'm going to spend my time talking about this thing. I'm not an expert on this, but I'm going to spend my time talking about this thing. It's a weird move, yeah?
No.
You don't think?
No, I'm a free American. I can talk about what I like to.
You can talk about what you want. I've noticed you can. But
so
we all
the
can.
point?
The point is, what are you pushing? What are you watering?
What am I pushing?
Yes.
Liberty, free markets, peace, prosperity, not getting in another stupid catastrophic war, which we're on the precipice of.
Look how upset they're getting because he called them out on their bullshit.
Right now, that's what I'm pushing.
What are we on the precipice of?
Well, I think weren't you just talking about it the other day? Everyone I hear on the inside says we're about to attack Iran. I think you just said something about that the other day. Am I wrong about that? I thought I saw in one of your interviews that you did.
No. That doesn't mean we are on the verge of a war. I mean, you keep referring to we being in wars. There's a very big difference between a country having a military that's engaged and a country being at war. This country has not been at war for 25 years. You have not been fighting for the American homeland for 25 years.
Yes, we haven't. That's true. We haven't had a war on our shores. We've been picking on third world countries halfway around the world.
Well, you haven't been randomly picking on them. In Afghanistan, you went...
I didn't say it was random.
Yeah, right, okay. It wasn't like you suddenly decided to bomb, again, Myanmar or something. You went to Afghanistan to find bin Laden and take revenge for 9/11 and stop an attack like that happening again on the American homeland. That's very different from a country being at war.
Yeah, but that's a total mischaracterization of the war in Afghanistan. It's one thing to say that might be an accurate characterization of the Special Operations Mission in late 2001, but then we fought a 20-year regime change war against the Taliban.
Because you got dragged into the quicksand of war. Yes.
Okay, fine. But I thought it wasn't a war. Like, I don't get
No,
the
I said
argument.
it was a war. It's your use of we, as if you're personally like suffering this war. Yeah, you're
yes, when I say we,
we're
it
taxpayers,
implies,
so
okay.
we pay for it. Okay, fine.
So if I went back and corrected you on every time you've used the term we to refer to your government or something like that, like if I were to say, oh, we just imposed tariffs on China, would you point out that I didn't and it was the Trump administration?
You take it obviously very personally, and that's your right to do so, of course. I'm just trying to make sure we're accurate here.
What do you think I'm taking personally?
Just that, the American wars.
Sure, yeah. I think they've killed hundreds of thousands of people and cost my country $8 trillion.
Oh, yeah.
And degraded my country very much.
And there's a very good argument to make on that. I'm still slightly bemused about this move from I'm an expert on this and I have views to I'm a comedian.
I've never claimed to be an expert on anything.
This is the problem, Joe. I mean, if somebody says...
You have to claim to be an expert on something to have an opinion on something?
You don't have to be. You don't have to be.
So
This is like, I'm not a historian, but I'm pumping out history. I'm not an expert, but I'm talking all the time about
But
this
you're not
thing.
even talking about specifically on what he just said.
No, I'm saying, this is my point about this. You say, I'm not an expert.
So what's the solution? To not talk about it?
No, it's to have more experts around.
Well, the expert class hasn't done a great job.
I know.
So everybody is so turned off by fact checkers, right? Because that becomes such a contention on social media that now we're not fact checking any fucking thing. Anybody can come on and and Joe would say, "Well, that's crazy. I don't know about that, but that sounds crazy. Yeah, that's pretty crazy. I can't believe we're doing that because you just told me for the first time ever, and it must be true."
This is follow the science.
Absolutely, absolutely. I agree with that. I just said to you, I agree with that.
I know,
But one of the problems
during
is...
all of
Fire
COVID,
away.
I will put my track record against any of the expert class on COVID. I'm glad to do that. So should I just shut up? Should I shut up by opposing lockdowns and opposing vaccine mandates
No,
and talk
that
about
was the
lab
argument at the
theory?
time. You realize
That's the
that,
entire
right?
argument that you're making. Let the experts handle this.
No.
You're not an expert.
You're wildly not listening to what I'm saying. I think you have to take... I think we should agree.
And we've put way too much trust in comedians for some reason. Like Dave Smith is a comedian. That's his job.
Following, but one major thing can break down in front of your eyes, or many major things, and it does not mean that every single one of the sewer gates should be lifted. Okay?
Yeah, I get that.
But
Right.
who's saying it should be?
I'm saying this is a chance.
His most recent episode was called Dave Smith, War Avoided for Now, Part of the Problem, number 1255. Is he not coming across like he has some type of expertise in this? Like he has some type of knowledge about it? And he's not just a fucking comedian?
On what is part of our side at the moment is that a lot of the sewer gates are being lifted, sometimes by people who know that they're doing it, sometimes by people who don't, sometimes by people who say, I don't know, I'm just throwing it out there. But at the very least, there's some damn hygiene that should be required, isn't there?
Yeah, I'm not sure
Right.
exactly what you're asking, but sure.
Just that. Let's have a bit of hygiene on our own side, not lift every sewer gate.
And when you say
Not
our own side,
let-
you mean the right wing broadly speaking?
Broadly speaking, and I'm sort of funny about libertarians. I'm never quite sure. I always say I think libertarians are essentially the bisexuals of politics. They should just choose, Joe. They should choose. It's kind of they just want everything at the buffet.
That's very funny.
Well, I think we want some things. I don't know. Okay, that's a weird way to put it, but
Yeah,
I
I see your point.
All right, well,
Libertarians aren't even libertarians anymore. Libertarians, one of their core beliefs is there is no borders. People should be free to travel. Free immigration.
I mean, I don't know.
Libertarians are just, I'm a Trump supporting conservative, but I don't want to be called a conservative.
I mean, essentially, I just don't. Maybe there's something I'm missing here. But if your argument is that, like, you're saying I claim to be an expert, but then I have like a parachute to get out of it by being like, hey, I'm just a comedian. I was just saying this. But I don't think I've ever like really claimed to be an expert. I
Why
have
are you
opinion.
going?
Libertarian beliefs, state-enforced national boundaries are arbitrary and violently imposed, and therefore can provide no justification for the government can provide no justification for restricting the movement of immigrants or a people.
I know, but
I'm interested in these topics.
Yeah, I know, but isn't it weird to go around, for instance, let's get to the last year and a half. It's a bit weird to be simultaneously saying I'm not an expert on a conflict and talking about it everywhere.
I don't think so. Not really. I mean, I don't know. I don't think like I don't see how you
Do you talk about these things?
Which things?
All these things that we're talking about.
Some of them, yeah.
Are you an expert?
I am on some, yes.
On some, but
You talk
not.
about something you're not an expert on.
You'll
Right,
notice
so
that
what should you do? What should you do if those subjects get breached?
Well, I think that you educate yourself as much as you
Should
can.
you say I'm not an expert and then give your opinion if you're in the middle of a
I think
conversation?
it's, as I say, I think that it's a weird move to say I'm not an expert on this, but I'm going to talk about it nonstop. I think that is true.
Listen, I will certainly concede that I am weird.
Nonstop.
I'm not disagreeing with you. It's weird that I'm as obsessed with all this stuff as I am. I mean, like, okay, I'm a weird guy. I tell jokes at nightclubs and then get obsessed with politics and monetary policy and like, okay, fine. But I just like fundamentally disagree with this idea that which I really do think is quite anti-democratic in spirit and quite elitist. That there's an expert class. They can have opinions on all of these things. It's weird for any regular person who's just read about it.
Not my view. Not my view.
It seems like what
No,
you're saying.
I feel like a lot of these people probably subconsciously they want a specific thing to be true. So they'll say, like, I've done my research, right? They'll say, I've done research. But they want an outcome, so they consume information that leads them to that outcome, right? They want a certain outcome, or they want a certain person to be right, or they want a certain group to look good, and subconsciously they only consume that. You should give due regard to thoroughly researching an issue that you're going to be talking about this much. It's one thing for someone to ask you, like, what do you think about the war in Iraq? And you're like, I don't know. It doesn't seem that much. It's another thing to have 32 episodes on why the war in Iraq was wrong and only know one side of the argument that you found on Twitter, right? Or it should be. Here's his response, supposedly. I just now found it. So, oh my God, it's an hour long.
Hello.
We won't be watching all this.
Guys, hope everybody.
He did say that he says, my response to Douglas Murray's garbage.
He's doing good. I just thought I would jump on here and do a little impromptu, some bonus content for you guys. Obviously, you can tell I'm not at home. I'm out in Chicago doing some stand-up shows with Robbie the Fire Bernstein. It's been a lot of fun. I love Chicago. The Zanies in Chicago and Rosemont are two of my favorite clubs in the world. So I've been having a lot of fun out here. And there are, if you guys want to come out, there's the early show tonight is sold out, but I believe there's still some tickets left for the late show. So come on out if you're in the area. Okay, so I thought I would jump on here and respond a little bit to Douglas Murray's. He just wrote an op-ed for the New York Post in which he discussed our debate from last week. He was also just on Bill Maher's show and talked a little bit about it. So anyway, I thought I'd read the op-ed and we could go through it because it is it's just so ridiculous and it's I think truly revealing. There's an interesting dynamic.
There was another clip to this, and I think it was about Palestine and Israel. Hold on.
Have you been to the crossing points?
No,
When were you last there at all?
I've never been.
You've never been.
Well, am I not allowed to talk about it now?
This was before their last little meltdown, so just listen to the audio to this.
Have you ever been to Nazi Germany? Are you allowed to have feelings about them?
You can't time travel, but you can travel.
Okay, but so what? So what's the point? Like,
No, I
okay,
find that
lots
very-
of people have been there.
I was just going to let you listen to the audio. Look at his face. He can tell there's something wrong. Like, you can look at this Dave Smith's face. He's embarrassed. Watch this.
Have you been to the crossing points?
No,
When were you last there at all?
I've never been.
You've never been.
Well, am I not allowed to talk about it now? Have you ever been to Nazi?
You can tell he feels some type of way. you can tell, maybe subconsciously, he feels some type of way about like, oh, well, yeah, I guess I've never actually seen what's going on there. And all the research I consume is basically fucking Twitter threads. So, but like he's got that look on his face.
Germany? Are you allowed to have feelings about them?
You can't time travel, but you can travel.
Okay, but so what? So what's the point? Like,
No,
okay.
I find that
lots of people have been there and agree with me, and lots of people have been there and agree with you.
Yeah, but
so
if
I don't
you're
know
going to
what
spend a year and a half talking about a place, you should at least do the courtesy of visiting it.
all right.
Obsessively talking about it. Like it's one of every 3 episodes.
I just think this is a non-argument.
You don't
but
think?
Okay. No, I think it's a non-argument.
But if you're an expert,
Well, you have to go and touch the ground.
no, I think you have to see. I think it's a good idea to see stuff, particularly if you
Okay.
spend a career talking about something. Yes, I have a journalistic rule of trying never to talk about a country even in passing unless I've at least been there.
This is one of the, I would say, one of the greatest nations on earth. In terms
Certainly one of the great cultures of Earth.
cultures,
Yes.
the peoples of
Yes,
Iran.
yeah. In the case of the revolutionary government in Iran,
I don't know why I skipped to another video, but here we are.
you know, when the Green Revolution in 2009 started in Iran,
Oh, I guess they're saying he hasn't been to Iran.
to Tehran and to Iran and in pre-revolutionary Iran, Iranian Revolution,
But again, he's talking about history. Like again, he can't time travel.
expansionism across the region, Tehran, Iran, the revolutionary Islamic government in Iran, Iran, Tehran is Iran, back off.
Okay, so it's like a clip of it of places he's talking about.
Have you been to the crossing points?
Same thing here. It's the same clip. Anyways, we'll go back to his response for a little bit. I'm not watching an hour-long response.
That's going on here because there's so much.
Not on the stream.
There's so many lies and like intentional bullshit that Douglas is spewing. But the thing that I find most interesting about it is that Douglas is falling into a problem that is really a microcosm of a larger problem that the corporate media is had, as we've kind of watched the corporate media apparatus collapse before our very eyes. And it's something that I've talked a bit about on the show. There's this dynamic where the audience of the podcast world is so much larger.
Maybe I'm out of touch. Maybe it's me. But, okay, let's say it very well could be me because I don't watch TV. Let's say you're walking down the street and you see somebody approaching you on the sidewalk and they like check their phone or something and they look up at you. You could just tell like they're upset and they say, "Oh my God, did you just hear? Russia launched a nuclear attack against Poland." Okay, hypothetically. Do you go find your favorite comedian's podcast? Because they keep saying like this legacy media is dead, right? Do you go find your favorite comedian's podcast immediately? Do you go look for your favorite Twitch streamer? Or would you just fucking go to a credible, like Google it, go to a credible fucking source and click on it? Like if all the sources popped up and it was like CNN, MSNBC, even Fox, all these news sources, and then the one up from the bottom, it said Joe Rogan podcast. Is that the one you're clicking on?
Larger than
Am I out of
the
touch?
corporate media, that it's becoming impossible for them to frame the issue the way they want to, when they're lying, when they're being dishonest about it.
When they're lying, got it.
One of the examples that I used that I thought was really fascinating during the campaign was my buddy Tony Hinchcliffe, if you guys remember. He spoke at Donald Trump's rally at Madison Square Garden. And he did he did what Tony does. He did like roast comedy. He roasted everybody. And so what happened?
He made that really shitty joke about Puerto Rico being a floating island of garbage.
It was streamed on YouTube. It's clipped up on Twitter. I mean, I don't even know how you would go about measuring how many people saw that, but it was in the tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions. It's just the numbers were huge. It was the viral sensation of that week. And then the corporate media attempts to say that this was a speaker at a Trump rally, not a comedian doing shock jock humor.
But he was a speaker at a Trump rally.
A speaker just got up there and said all these things about Puerto Ricans. By the way, it was interesting that they picked.
Actually, every news source I went through said Tony Hinchcliffe, known for his comedic takes and roast and all that shit. Like, everybody identified him as a comedian, 100%.
Puerto Ricans. He roasted everybody, but they picked Puerto Ricans because I think they're like a big voting demographic in Pennsylvania. It was like so cynical and obvious. But the major problem that
they used Puerto Ricans because he said it was their home was a floating island of garbage in the ocean.
Had with this lie was that everybody had already seen it.
Okay.
ABC is broadcasting to 150,000 people, maybe. And 100 million people have watched the video on Twitter. So not only did way more people see the actual thing and they know what it is, so you can't lie to them about that, but most of your own audience has seen it on Twitter. So I don't know, I just felt like there's a similar dynamic here where it's like, dude, you could go on Bill Maher's show and claim that, just lie through your teeth and say that, what happened was people on Joe Rogan's show were talking about how Hitler's not that bad. A bullshit lie that me and Joe called you out on the show, and you had nothing to back it up. You didn't have an example.
Like Ian Carroll is that person. Ian Carroll is that person saying people like Winston Churchill was the real villain of World War II. And the reason how they justify this is they're saying, oh, we won the war. Look at Europe now. There's gay people and migrants and trans people. Europe is awful. So really, did we win the war?
Example that you could cite. Anyway, we'll get into some of this in the article. But it's just like, dude, this doesn't work anymore. You can't go to the New York Post and claim that what happened was different than what actually happened because more people have already seen it, including most of the people reading this New York Post article. And in fact, in the comments section, he's just getting skewered. But okay, so let's go through this piece by Douglas Murray. It is, if you guys want to go read it for yourself, the title is Douglas Murray, so-called Hamas-Ukraine war, quote, experts spew false info on Joe.
Douglas Murray, so-called experts spew. Oh, I might not. I actually have to fucking pay for it. Last week, I seemed to break the internet. I went back to Joe Rogan podcast to talk about my new book on democracies and death cults, Israel and the future civilizations, which is available at all bookstores on Audible, since you asked. I've been on Joe's podcast a number of times before, and he always enjoyed it. Joe is a master of his art. A lot of people think they can talk casually, but interestingly, a lot of people think they can talk casually, but interestingly, for hours. Yeah, I don't think I have a New York Post subscription, unless it's a free one. Joe is a master of his art. That's mainly because Joe makes it look so easy, but this time I went on with a question. Having not spoken to Joe since the wars in Ukraine and Israel started, I had become increasingly irked that the guests he has on have been almost entirely anti-Ukraine and anti-Israel. Many of the latter in particular are not just vindictively and maliciously anti-Israel, but have been spewing claims that are demonstrably false. Many are also people who are simply in no way expert at what they are talking about. One of those is a comedian who goes by the name of Dave Smith, claiming some Jewish ancestry. He has spent 18 months since October 7, 2023, being very unfunny indeed. Specifically, he has decided to spend his time going around the podcast world sounding off about Israel. In the process, he largely cites people like him, people who have many views but no obvious expertise. People like Daryl Cooper, who says he isn't a historian, yet has been invited onto some of the world's biggest podcasts as a historian. One of Cooper's many ahistorical claims is that Winston Churchill was the chief villain of World War II. That's the guy I was talking about. He's been on Tucker as well. On these and many other occasions, Cooper has simply lied about history. When invited to debate the world's foremost living expert on Churchill last year, he declined, saying that he didn't know enough to go against such a figure. Yet Cooper still gets invited to the show, after show, to throw out falsehoods that he can't even back up, and on which his online interviews seem happy not to challenge him. Another such figure from the world of comedy who is changing his shape to fit the time is Rogan guest Ian Carroll. I specifically hate Ian Carroll as well. This is someone who, when he last went on Rogan's podcast, very carefully tried to minimize the evil of Adolf Hitler, outrageously and completely falsely. Ian Carroll claimed that in the 1930s, Hitler had kept his anti-Semitism down. A provably false claim that Rogan did nothing to counter. All these men have also been palling around online with Holocaust deniers and proud anti-Semites like Jake Shields. Jake is a bad one as well. 2 weeks ago, Rogan had his mate Dave Smith on yet again for a long podcast. But for my return to the show, the deal was that I could come on only if Dave Smith was once again in the studio, and if Joe didn't want to be unaccompanied. As if Joe didn't want to be unaccompanied. So he was invited on only if Dave Smith could be there too. It sounds like that Joe set that up. Or that Joe thought it was I, of all his guests, who must be challenged. I like debate as much as the next Scotsman, but what resulted was more than a debate. It seems to have led to some kind of podcast world meltdown The reason was that from the outset, I challenged Joe on his choice of guests and why he had been giving a platform to only one side of a debate, and very conspiratorial one at that. He and Smith immediately were defensive, but the real problem came when I raised the issue of expertise. Because, as I said then, and have said often, we have lived through a period when the experts have gotten an awful lot of things wrong. From the COVID lab leak to Hunter Biden laptop, we have lived through years after which distrust of experts has become inevitable. Yet, that doesn't mean that expertise does not exist. It does not mean that a comedian can simply hold himself out as a Middle East expert and should be listened to as if he has any body of work. It does not mean that someone who says they are not a historian, but who practices false history should be cited as an historian. This point seems to rile both Smith and Rogan. It appears to have riled their audiences even more because many people seem to think what I mean is that they are not allowed to have an opinion. That is wrong. I think they are. It's just that there should be a price to pay for spreading bullshit. And part of that price is that you should be called out. If I had gone on Rogan's podcast and held myself out as an expert in MMA fighting, I suspect he would have noticed. If I had kept making mistake after mistake and shown ignorance, piled upon ignorance, I think he'd say, hey, you don't seem to be very knowledgeable about this. And he'd be right. So why is it hard to grasp that something similar applies in other areas? In bigger rings and more important fights. Having spent most of the last 18 months in Israel, Gaza, Lebanon, Ukraine, I don't think I know everything. But I think I know a darn sight more than someone like Comic Smith, who admitted he'd never even been to the region that he spends all his time talking about. Oh, so you have to go to a country to comment on it, do you? He said part of the internet. Again, the answer is obviously not, but if it's your job or you're making it your job, then probably yes. If I filed columns for this paper pretending to be an expert on countries I've never been to, I would expect my readers to complain, as they should. If I filed columns about a war zone from the safety of West Palm Beach, I think it would be fraud. Journalism has had its own meltdowns in recent years, but it doesn't mean that we don't have standards. Much thought that might amaze some people. What the standards are in the new media, especially on podcasts, is still being worked out. But there must be some. Otherwise, the new media will lead people into errors and evils far greater than the old world media could ever dream of. So that's his whole piece there. An opinion column. That's it. That's all of it.
And in fact, in the comments section, he's just getting skewered. But okay, so let's go through this piece by Douglas Murray. It is, if you guys want to go read it for yourself, the title is Douglas Murray, so-called Hamas-Ukraine war, quote, experts spew false info on Joe Rogan's podcast. There has to be a standard. Bit of a long title, but there you go. Okay, reading from the article. Last week, I seemed to break the internet. I went back on the Joe Rogan podcast to talk about my new book, which is available at all bookstores. Since you asked, I've been on Joe's podcast a number of times before. And
I didn't know he's going to read it all to us.
Mainly because Joe makes it look so easy. But this time I went on with a question. Having not spoken to Joe since the wars in Ukraine and Israel started, I'd become increasingly irked that his deliciously anti-Israel would have been spewing claims that are demonstrably false. All right. Many are also people who are simply in no way expert at what they are talking about. All right. Attacks on Israel. One of these is a comedian who goes by the name of Dave Smith, claiming some Jewish ancestry. He has spent the 18 months since October 7th, 2023, being very unfunny indeed. Sorry, it's hard to not read this in his condescending voice. Specifically, he has decided to spend his time going around the podcast world sounding off about Israel. Okay, so right away, it's just, I mean, what can you even say about that? A
lot of people think Ian Carroll is like a plant because he blew up out of nowhere. Out of fucking nowhere.
Sorry, this New York Post link is, I don't know why the New York Post is such an annoying website to read.
It was hard for me to read. I don't know if you guys saw. I was struggling. That's why I highlighted it all. I don't know what the fuck. The top font or the spacing or the double spacing, something. It was hard for me to read.
So, by the way, it's so funny that in the midst of Douglas Murray's, appeal to expertise and his, argument that people are just asking questions and they're kind of hiding behind this way. You're not just asking questions. You're doing more than you're saying something. What the hell is this? Claiming some Jewish ancestry? Would Douglas Murray describe any Jewish person who was pro the war in Gaza? Would he describe any of them as claiming some Jewish ancestry? Doesn't that kind of feel like just asking questions? I mean, he claims Jewish ancestry. Like, yeah, that's what being Jewish is. I mean, separating the religion from, the people or whatever. But Yes, I claim some Jewish ancestry. My mom and my dad. That's the ancestry. But again, it's like you.
Hold on. Here's a clip of Ian Carroll on with the two black twin guys.
I mean, what he did to Jewish people is like unfathomable. It's horrible. But I guess like. Yeah, recommended to me. I got some transcribed Hitler speeches in English. Yeah. I was like, oh, this dude's probably racist as shit. He's probably gonna say the N-word. Right after this, I was like, oh my gosh.
He's just very pro-German.
They've all been talking about listening to Hitler's speeches in English and how they sound just like, oh, they're just pro-German. It sounds like a speech we'd have in the U.S. But, I mean, not about Germany, but about the U.S.
And TikTok is all over those videos right now. TikTok is eating that shit up. And that's the thing about this. I think that all of this is circling around this like transformation that's happening from controlled information to open information. Right. Because for the longest time, ever since history started, it was, do you know how to read? Do you know how to write? Like, do you know, like, can you get the information? And now the last element of control is just gone. Like, the internet opens it all up. And so suddenly everything is open. And it's going to take decades for that to transform our culture in all the ways that it will. But suddenly something that was as simple as just not allowing any translated speeches of Hitler's to be published to now everyone can listen to what he really said. And so all your arguments have to stand up to the truth. Right. And so like the Holocaust is a good example of one where it's like, I don't think that the Holocaust did not happen. So to be clear, what I'm saying is something happened for sure. But I know that the narratives around the Holocaust that I was taught in school, they were forged in the era of controlled information. And we are now entering the era of open information. And a lot of the like Holocaust denial stuff that goes around on Twitter is presenting evidence that is worth talking about because like we've never had that conversation because we were never allowed to.
Super worth talking about. Like, they believe it happened, but it was mostly Christians and not nearly as many people. And there's no way that many people could have died. Of course, it's still denialism.
Know for a fact he would never say this about anyone else, but this is supposed to be like a little dig on me or something. Okay, you're right. I'm faking it. I'm faking my being Jewish for all the benefits that come with that or something. All right. And yes, he says, I've talked about these things. You know, what's kind of interesting is that literally the day before he wrote this piece, or the day of he wrote this piece, he went on Bill Maher's show. Did he start by calling out Bill Maher for being a comedian? Someone
called him out back in early March. Someone called out Ian Carroll and said, you're so close. You're so close to naming the right people who are pulling all the strings. The last piece of the puzzle, Ian, that you need to find, read the Talmud. So basically they're saying, like, you're so close to seeing Jews run everything, right? And how horrible they are and how they pull all the strings and they're manipulating them. Read the Talmud. And Ian responded with, I'm playing chess. So he's literally telling people ahead of time, like, I'm edging up against the anti-Semitic stuff just to get people to like me, but then I'll lead them down the road to where they really know what's up. It's these dirty Jews.
Who's not an expert who talks about these issues? No, he didn't. Oh, it's almost as if that was never really the issue. It's almost like you're completely full of shit, and really your issue is just that people are being critical of Israel. That's the issue that you have, not that they don't have the correct level of expertise. Okay. And
I can't stand Dave Smith anymore.
And I had just made this whole documentary about the history of Israel-Palestine and the propaganda and what it all was. And I published it on October 6th on my Locals channel. And then literally the next day, and I'm not saying that October 7th was a good thing, but I'm saying that literally the next day, the entire internet was ablaze about Israel and Palestine, and everyone was talking about it.
Wow. I'm not saying October 7th is a good thing, but...
Literally the next day, the entire internet was ablaze about. I published it on October 6th on my Locals channel. And then literally the next day, and I'm not saying that October 7th was a good thing, but I'm saying that literally the next day, the entire internet was ablaze about Israel and Palestine, and everyone was talking about it. Wow. And it was the weirdest fucking coincidence, like, and suddenly it was like, oh, all right, let's fucking dig this thing open. And I had just made this whole document.
Ian Carroll is a real piece of shit. And he went from... If you can find Ian Carroll videos like 5, 6, 7 years ago, he was like a human rights leftist, like, hey, we can't be doing this to people. This is horrible. We need to make sure this country isn't treating these people this way and that way. To now he's basically pro-genocide. Let's listen to another clip.
What do we and don't we know for real about the World War II history? And like, how are we so sure? And why are we not allowed to ask those questions? Because obviously, like, we see the manipulation of our information today. Why wouldn't it have been manipulated around World War II when it was way easier for them to do? And so what do we and don't?
I don't know. The guy's wild, but he has blown the fuck up on Twitter. And honestly, the first time I saw him, he was going through the fucking food aisle and saying, what big companies own all the cereal companies and weird shit like that.
Huge rabbit hole here, but Israel has always had an insane amount of spies in the U.S. and has been subverting the U.S. ever since they were founded. And that's everything from like they literally stole nuclear weapons from us and built a secret nuclear facility that John F. Kennedy was trying to audit and shut down, by the way. They did that with like some of the most famous like technological leaks of all time, all the way up to like Jonathan Pollard, the Promise software scandal, right up to 9/11. A lot of people don't know that before 9/11, there's this whole document called the Israeli Art Students, DEA files. You ever heard about those? So you can find them on the internet if you search like things like DEA files, Israeli art students.
Can you look that up, Steve?
You can probably find it, and it's a report written by the DEA. And what was happening is in 2000 and 2001, there's like all these government agencies were reporting. Yeah, all those are it. And what they were doing is they like at first no one realized what was happening because there was these like people walking into like the DEA office in like whatever in Orlando, Florida. Yeah. And they were saying like, "Hi, I'm an art student from Israel representing this university, and I would like to sell you some art. Are you interested in looking at any art? Is there anyone I can show this art to?" It's like, why the fuck are you in the DEA's office, like, or any other government building? Like they were just going to all these government buildings, posing as Israeli art students trying to sell art. And as they started to report it up the chain realized that this was happening all across America.
It says Tampa.
Yeah, all across America.
The DEA Tampa has revealed much information related to these individuals. DEA agents in Tampa district office questioned the team leader of a group of 9 individuals at length. The team leader stated he purchases the paintings for $8 to $10 from an individual in Hollywood, Fort Lauderdale, Florida area. What the
That's all a cover story, though. That's all just made up bullshit. Okay. And so the thing about this document is it's actually super lengthy, and it's really hard to get to the bottom of what it is if you don't read the whole thing. But what it is it's all across America. In 2000 and 2001, Israel was running, the Mossad was running a massive surveillance campaign on all of our government buildings, and this was their cover, was Israeli art students, and they were using it to gain access to the buildings and then to surveil the buildings, to write down blueprints. A lot of these people were actually ex like Israeli intelligence that had backgrounds in explosive experts, in surveillance technology and wiring, just things that like go into that building. And
were they wiring these paintings and trying to sell them to them?
I don't think so. No, maybe it's hard to say. Like we don't know entirely because a lot of them, like once they started to get caught, they would change their stories around a lot. Some of them got stopped and interviewed a lot, but they never really could act on it a whole lot. Oh, WikiSpooks is a whole rabbit hole.
WikiSpooks?
Do you know about WikiSpooks?
No.
Oh, you're gonna love it, dude.
Oh
WikiSpooks is Wikipedia for fucking tinfoil hat conspiracy theorists, and it is the coolest resource. And it's a link just like you would think. The best one to start on is 9/11 WikiSpooks because it's the most like complete. It's not.
Click on
and then the other one is
9/11. Israel did it.
Yeah. So you have to obviously double check everything that's on WikiSpooks thoroughly.
No.
But it is a really fun resource to get you going because it's like nothing's held back. It's all there and it's all linked, and it's not all true, but it is actually a really cool. It's just so much fun. But
it's the opposite of Wikipedia basically. It's
exactly, because Wikipedia is all controlled.
They hold back all the fun stuff. Where if you're on WikiSpooks, you're like, hold on, you're going the other direction now. You're like, hold on, you guys are going way too far with this.
And you wind up somewhere in the middle.
Yeah.
But anyways, the Israeli arts.
all right, that's almost 9 minutes long. I'm not watching the rest of that. And then Tucker Carlson has this viewpoint as well.
Has America won a war since World War II?
Well, you're assuming we won World War II, but we're not allowed to lecture about anything. You're in a military alliance.
You're assuming we won World War II.
Okay. That wasn't what Churchill did.
And you guys remember when Tucker Carlson was wined and dined and did this puff piece with Vladimir Putin, right?
Here's what you shut the fuck up. People want to tell me.
And he's like, you wouldn't believe how cheap these cucumbers are over here in Russia at the grocery store.
Incredible guy. Really? Well, why didn't he save Western civilization? He didn't even say Poland.
He did save Western civilization.
How?
He defeated the Nazis.
What is Western civilization?
Well, welcome back to Rattlesnake TV, guys. In this video, we are going to be reviewing the recent debate between Tucker Carlson and Piers Morgan, particularly the bit where they talked about World War II. This was a really interesting clash of takes here by two very prominent figures, and I'm really looking forward to seeing what you guys write in the comments about this one, because it's bound to divide the comments, but that is what we love. That's the fun part, and honestly, that's the reason why I love this community, because even if we don't agree on anything, I always do learn new things from the comments. So, I mean,
the only good thing about the Ian Carroll thing is a lot of the people that already believe the Ian Carroll stuff before he got there. So he is bringing new people into this anti-Semitic, Jews run everything. But the people that already believe that, they're almost unanimously calling him out. He just rose too quickly. He became too famous too quickly, and they think he's a plant. They think he's a fucking plant, 100%.
Have at it down below, and with that, let's get into the first part.
Going forward in the next 4 years, if he can avoid a war with Iran and a war with Russia, a deepening war with Russia, he will be the most effective president really since the founding, I think. He will really change the country for the better. Those are as of today, those are the two things I can imagine where it's just not possible to govern because you're so distracted, because you're so broke, because there's so much else going on. So if you can avoid those two things, and there are all these forces.
Well, he shares your view about war, which is he's anti-war instinctively.
Of course.
He thinks America's waged far too many
That's
wars.
why he got elected.
Yeah, but prohibitively expensive. Yes. He sees war both in terms of people who die and just financially ruinous, and has been a massive drain on America.
We're broke because of wars.
Right.
We're literally broke.
Right. So, I mean, Elon Musk keeps warning people, America will go bust if this continues, if the spending continues at the rate.
Dude, the more I look into, you guys might think I'm a nut job. I wish I could do a better job explaining it, but I don't understand it good enough to, I understand it, but I don't understand it enough to explain it to you guys. But the more I look into modern monetary theory, modern money theory, the more I think, yeah, this makes perfect fucking sense. I'll give you, you need to watch I think it's called Finding the Money. I've said this before. Finding the Money. I think's the name of it. Her name is Stephanie Kelton. Stephanie Kelton. Finding the Money. Basically, how could I explain this without destroying it to where you guys would think, I'm never looking into that. There is no issue whatsoever with a strong, stable government like ours printing money. That's literally their job, is to print money. The problem is allocating those money, finding the resources, and getting the work done that they want to be done, and controlling inflation. People look at what happened during COVID, like everybody got checks and money and we were giving away money and inflation went through the roof. Yeah, but also there was supply chains. There was this fucking virus going all over the world. People thought could be the end of the world. Like, it was a really bad times. I don't think that's a good example of modern monetary theory. The government could print all the money they fucking wanted to pay for everything that they wanted, right? This idea that like, oh, the deficit, we got to pay this off and people are going to come call in and collect is just not true. It was at one time when we backed our money with gold. It's just not anymore, okay? The only thing they've got to be worried about is putting the money to good use and controlling for inflation. Inflation is the big one, right? We don't want to see 1,000% inflation and you can't afford anything even though you got tons of money. And modern monetary theory is the study of not where will we find the money, who are we going to tax. You tax the rich and get the money back in. It's pretty simple the way everything works when you're not using gold, because nobody can come in and say, I want $100 worth of gold anymore. And that's not the major issue. The major issue is, again, finding the resources. It's better for the government to be printing that money and putting it into businesses, improving our infrastructure. Like that's probably something you could get everybody to agree on. Our infrastructure is pretty bad compared to other first world countries. And the further you get away from bigger cities, the more it's like uninspected and falling apart and bridges are about ready to collapse and shit, the interstate system. Our government could print all the money that they needed to fix all the infrastructure in the United States. Okay? As long as it was allocated appropriately, it was paid for appropriately, like we're not just funding some PAC or somebody skimming off the top or a bunch of scammers that aren't going to do the work like when they did the high-speed internet stuff. And they keep a close eye on inflation. We could do all of that. There is no we got this much debt, how are we going to pay for it, who are we going to tax, who are we going to do that? We don't have the money for it. That's a lie. We might watch it one day. You guys want to watch a documentary for a movie night one day? How long is it? I'd have to shut up. It's an hour and a half about modern monetary theory, and it's really, really good. And I personally believe in it. The more I look into it, the more I believe in it. And the biggest argument against it are like, oh, they had their chance during COVID. We were just giving everybody money and it didn't work. Inflation shot up. But you guys don't remember the logistical issue? Inflation just didn't shoot up because people had money. Inflation shot up because we were locked up. People were spending money. We were giving some out, but you couldn't even buy things. Everything was stopped at the ports. Nobody was shipping. Nobody was working. Obviously, that's not just the giving out the money part.
He sent it abroad. Trillions of dollars since 9/11. So, yeah, I mean, that's just a math question. I don't think there's much debate about it. But there's a huge debate in Washington about how to proceed. And there's a lot of pressure on Trump to go to war with Iran and to deepen the war with Russia. And, you could argue as to why people would want
a lot of pressure on Trump to go to war with Iran. He's the one saying if they don't want to negotiate, then bombs are going to be falling like they've never seen before.
But they do, and a lot of them are donors, and they're putting a lot of pressure on him and his nominees. And I think he wants to resist it, is my sense, because the people pushing it have an unbroken track record of failure and destruction. It's not like if you're some neocon foreign policy theorist, you can point to like a lot of successes. Look what we did in Libya. Right. How's Iraq doing?
Well,
it's insane. They're insane.
Has America won a war since World War II?
All right, here we go.
Well, you're assuming we won World War II, but
well, you certainly helped us win it.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, the worst leader in world history probably won it, Stalin. But whatever.
He was certainly a major part of it too.
Yeah, well, yeah.
Although we're going to come to you platforming a guy called Churchill, the real villain of World War II.
Platforming, talking to people we disagree with. No.
Did you disagree with him about that? Did you think Churchill was a villain?
I think your country's been destroyed, and I'm part English, so I have a right to say this. I can barely go there. It's so depressing and degraded. No offense. I mean that with great sadness.
Many people there feel the same.
Well, I feel that way. I have relatives there. I mean, I grew up going there. I mean, I'm part English. I have a right to say this. So I don't think.
What is your English connection?
I hate his fucking laugh.
Well, the Tuckers, English, and I have relatives there now, so I don't want to embarrass them by saying there. But and my point is, I've spent my life going there. I've always loved it. There are things about it I love now, but I go to London now, and I'm shocked by it. It's disgusting, and no self-respect at all. The people, the native English, the indigenous population of your island have no self-respect at all, and they can't even stand up and say, "Hey, get out of here!" We have way too much immigration, and it's not making the country better. It's making it much worse. And not just immigration, but replacing your manufacturing economy with a finance economy, where the sleaziest people in the world come to London and sell off all your assets, and no one can say anything about it. So I'm very distressed. I say that with love. And my only point is, how can you say Churchill saved Great?
Have you ever noticed that people who long about this, they dream about this, workers in factories and whistles and working 12-hour shifts and overtime, and they're the people that would never, ever, ever be working in a factory? Dude, there are some people that are cut out for working in a factory and they like it and they don't like change. For most people, it is a soul-wrenching slog that you fucking hate every goddamn day of your life. Like, I tried working in a factory. Thank God I got into maintenance pretty quick. I tried working in a factory. It is fucking horrible. Not to mention the pay sucks, the hour sucks, the shift sucks, everything fucking sucks. It's fucking horrible. Some people do it, some people enjoy it. That's on them. But I think the vast majority of people don't want to be locked up in a factory when we can actually get that done somewhere else and they can do a job they enjoy more here stateside.
Great Britain when it's in its current condition.
Well, you could say he certainly saved it at the time. I mean, he saved us from the Nazis along with America.
Were the Nazis planning to?
We couldn't have won it without America. So let's be clear about that. But there's no doubt that.
Did you hear what he said? Were the Nazis planning to attack? You miss the air raids and the bombings and the orphans that were made from it and people sending their kids away from the cities. And
to me, Winston Churchill will go down as one of the great historical figures because without his leadership,
Hitler literally said he was going to control the world.
We do not think that the Allies would have won that war.
Well, you wouldn't have been in the war without Churchill, but in the first place.
Well, we were in the war without Churchill. We were already in it.
Not to the extent that you became in it.
We were in the war before Churchill.
Well, hang on, he wasn't Prime Minister.
No, I'm very aware. Yeah. I'm very aware. Look, I think Churchill was one of the smartest people, certainly one of the best writers ever to hold any office in any country. I think he was a wonderful artist. I think he had a kind of flair that's irresistible, particularly to Americans. I think Americans like Churchill much more than the Brits do. You kicked him out of office at the end of the war, so
yeah.
Obviously.
But then we brought him back.
You brought him back. Here's my problem with Churchill. Again, the current state of Great Britain does not look to me like a country that won a war. It looks like a country that lost a war badly and was degraded. How did that happen? Why? You're not allowed to ask that because people are like, oh, that's Holocaust denial. I'm not Holocaust denial. That's one thing I would never deny. All these people got murdered. I'm not denying that at all. I'm talking about specifically Great Britain, the country of a lot of my ancestors, looks like it lost a war. How did that happen? I think it's a totally fair question. And anyone who says it's not a fair question is a liar. And I'm not going to be intimidated because I'm part English. So buzz off.
So as this video goes, we're going to...
So where does he get this idea from, though?
I don't know what I'm doing here. I don't know what I'm getting myself into. And it seems like the old Winston Churchill was not only a villain, but the chief villain of the Second World War. I've participated in the chat with my friend JD on the History Underground that he had, kind of watched it along with a lot of you and was in the chat room talking to people and saw some of it to the full myself.
I'm not English, so I don't have any weird motive in asking this, but how would you assess Winston Churchill?
I got in trouble with
Daryl Cooper. Daryl Cooper. That's how Tucker got there.
With my podcast partner, Jocko Willink, one time, because he's a New England Dutchman whose his family, it's near and dear to they're Dutch, but very near and dear to their heart that Winston Churchill is a hero, right?
Well, everyone
thinks that. He really thinks that. And I told him that I think, and maybe I'm being a little hyperbolic, maybe. But I told him, maybe trying to provoke him a little bit, that I thought Churchill was the chief villain of the Second World War. Now, he didn't kill the most people. He didn't commit the most atrocities. But I believe, and I don't really think, I think when you really get into it and tell the story right and don't leave anything out, you see that he was primarily responsible for that war becoming what it did, becoming something other than an invasion of Poland.
Other than an invasion of Poland? Are we just...
They just wanted Poland, guys. If we just let them have Poland, just like we let Russia have Ukraine, and then the rest of the world can be the rest of the world. We don't have to be bogged down in a war.
Can ignore everything that happened before that? The Anschluss of Austria, the taking of the Sudetenland, the gobbling up of the rest of Czechoslovakia.
This is what an expert looks like, by the way.
Militarizing the Rhineland.
This is vlogging through history. He's actually really good.
Gosh, what? We're going to say that it was just an invasion of Poland, no big deal?
Oh, I need to be subscribed.
Churchill is more responsible for that war than the regime in Germany? How can you even start to think that without... Oh, all right, let's go on.
I think there is an argument to be made that after the First World War, everybody lost a lot of money, everybody spent a lot of money, a lot of people died, a lot of people were mad after the First World War. I think that potentially we punished Germany so fucking badly because of the anger and the loss and what they caused in the First World. It was their fault, right? But still, we punished Germany so fucking badly that we kind of made this environment for Hitler to rise in, right? They were beaten, abused, downtrodden. They were looking for a hero. That's why I also think that if 2008 wouldn't have happened and the downturn in 2008, everybody's life got a little bit worse. The ultra wealthy got even wealthier. The poorer got poorer, and the housing market collapsed. And now you can't buy a home, and you can't do this, and you can't get a loan. You can't find a good job. If the downturn in 2008 didn't happen, I think there's a pretty good chance that Trump didn't happen, because Trump is good at monetizing your anger over what's going on in your life, right? You are poor, you can't afford a house, you can't afford a groceries, you can't do this, you can't do that. And he says, let's blame the brown people, let's blame the deep state, let's blame these people that are attacking me, I'm just like you. I think the same thing may have never happened with Hitler had the restrictions on Germany after the First World War not been as bad.
At every step of the way, like, people are very often, I find, surprised to learn. There's a two-step process.
Why don't you make the case for that? Okay,
All right, so first of all, let's just say this, because one of the things I keep seeing...
Look how excited he is. Look how excited Tucker is about. Wait. Make the case for that. Let's make the case.
I find surprised to learn. There's a two-step process.
Why don't you make the case for that? Okay,
all right, so first of all, let's just say this, because one of the things I keep seeing people in comment sections of videos, like on JD's live stream about this, is that it feels like people want to peel the layers back and say, hey, Winston Churchill was not necessarily a hero. And you know what? And they say, but we should do that with everybody. And that's absolutely true. There's no person in history who is a perfect hero, who doesn't have flaws and dark areas, and some have more than others. And absolutely,
But making him the villain of World War II is crazy.
Churchill is not a perfect person. And there are plenty of things to criticize him for, just as we can criticize any other leader from any other time. But to completely spin it all the way to the other side and say he's...
Oh, yeah, burn down the German parliament.
Not a hero, he's the villain? Come on.
You've made your statement. A lot of people are thinking, well, wait a second, you said Churchill, my childhood hero, the guy with the cigar.
They burned it down and then said that the communists were planning a violent uprising.
Yeah. Well, and the next thought that comes into their head is that, oh, you're saying Churchill was the chief villain, therefore his enemies, Adolf Hitler and so forth, were Stalin, the protagonists, right? Yeah. They're the good guys if you think he's a villain. That's not the case. That's not what I'm saying.
No, you're saying that he's more of a villain than Stalin and Hitler. Just let that sink in for a minute.
More of a villain, the chief villain, the worst villain. Even though he didn't kill as many people, he's the worst of all of these people.
More of a villain than them.
Germany, look, they put themselves into a position, and Adolf Hitler's chiefly responsible for this, but his whole regime is responsible for it, that when they went into the East in 1941, they launched a war where they were completely unprepared to deal with the millions and millions of prisoners of war, of local political prisoners and so forth, that they were going to have to handle. They went in with no plan for.
So this is part of the Holocaust revisionist, but it's almost like forgiving them. Like, Germany thought they could go to a world war, but they didn't realize, how can they take care of all these prisoners? So some of them died. That's excuses for the Holocaust when they were intentionally rounding up a certain group of people and killing them. Not, oh, well, we took over Poland. Where are we going to put all the Polish prisoners? Oh, no, some of them died. Damn it. I wish that wouldn't have happened.
For that. And they just threw these people into camps, and millions of people ended up dead there. You know?
Did he just say that
millions of people just ended up dead?
It was just kind of oops.
Not they were going out of their way to kill these fucking people. Millions of people just happen to die. It would be like if like in the U.S., you know, we've got prisoners in a jail in fucking Texas, and some type of bird flu broke out there, and we're like, man, we tried to save them, we tried to spread them out, but a bunch of them died. That's not the same as intentionally killing these people en masse.
Like they had a war and they had all these prisoners and some of them died. The Holocaust wasn't intentional. All these millions of people didn't die because of an intentional choice. Because guess what? Most of the captured soldiers from the UK and France and the United States did not end up dead because they had not planned to deal with them, but that happened by the millions with Soviet prisoners. It wasn't an accident. It wasn't an, oh my gosh, what do we do with all these people? It was an intentional choice by that regime because they saw Bolsheviks, communists, Soviets, Russians. They saw them as every bit as detestable and subhuman as they saw Jews and other people. Wow. Wow. We're 2 minutes in and I'm already flabbergasted by this guy's logic.
A lot of people leave that out because Russia's been our enemy so long, but they did kill a shit ton of Russians as well.
You have like letters as early as July, August 1941 from commandants of these makeshift camps that they're setting up for these millions of people who are surrendering or people they're rounding up. And so it's 2 months after, a month or two after Barbarossa was launched. And they're writing back to the high command in Berlin saying, we can't feed these people. We don't have the food to feed these people. And one of them actually says, rather than wait for them all to slowly starve this winter, wouldn't it be more humane to just finish them off quickly now?
Listen, I know he's not intentionally saying it this way, but the implication of what he's saying right now is that the mass extermination of millions of...
This is where Tucker got his ideas from.
...of Russians and other Soviet soldiers in camps was an act of mercy. Then why didn't they do that with the British soldiers that they were holding and the Americans that they would hold later on?
And so this is like 2 months into the invasion, right? And like
and Tucker Carlson's not even challenging any of this. He's just letting him say it.
View on this, I argue.
This guy has a podcast. It's called the Martyr Made. Is that what it is? Martyr Made podcast. And he's friends with Jocko, like he said.
With my Zionist interlocutors about this all the time with regard to the current war in Gaza.
Here we go.
Look, man, like maybe you, as the Germans, you felt like you had to invade to the east. Maybe you thought that Stalin was such a threat, or that if he launched a surprise attack and seized the oil field in Romania, that you would now not have the fuel to actually respond, and you'd be crippled, and all of Europe would be under threat, and whatever it was, that like maybe you thought you had to do that. But at the end of the day, you launched that war with no plan to care for the millions and millions of civilians and prisoners of war that were going to come under your control. And
all right, time out. All right, so I wanted to look up a few things just to have some facts and figures in front of me, and it looks like somewhere around 3 million Soviet prisoners of war died in German custody. They weren't put in gas chambers. They weren't shot by the millions, though many of them were shot. Most of them died from exposure and starvation. So this argument he's making that it was mercy killing is ridiculous because that's not how they died. They died of starvation. Also, the German government came right out and said, we are not obligated to protect Soviet prisoners of war because the Soviet Union did not sign the Geneva Conventions. Therefore, we'll honor it with the other countries, but we are under no obligation to offer protected status to these prisoners of war. They acknowledged that up front. They didn't try to pretend that, we couldn't feed them. They themselves said, we're going to let them die. We're going to use them as forced labor. We're going to use them as slave labor until they die of exposure or starvation because they don't deserve protection. So you're making an argument that not even Germany themselves made.
Millions of people died because of that, right? And you can look at it and say, like, so get back to your main question.
This guy's an idiot.
About Churchill. If you go to 1939, when the Germans and the Soviet Union invade Poland, as soon as that war's wrapped up on the German side, Hitler starts firing off peace proposals to Britain and France because they'd already declared.
Well, yeah, because he got what he wanted. He didn't want to go to war with all of them because he was preparing for the next war, which was going to be the Soviet Union. If he could avoid fighting France and Britain, he was all for that. This wasn't an attempt at peace. This was an attempt to get out of having to fight them.
Declared war. He didn't expect them to declare war, actually. Like, there was a famous scene where he kind of throws a fit when he finds out that they did do that. And so
surprise, surprise, they upheld their treaty obligations. They were in a defensive treaty with Poland that if Germany invaded Poland in an aggressive war, they would declare war on Germany, and they did.
He doesn't want to fight France. He doesn't want to fight Britain. He feels that's going to weaken Europe when we've got this huge threat to the east, the communist threat over there. And he starts firing off peace proposals. He says, let's not do this. Like, we can't do this. And of course, a year goes by, 1940 comes around, and they're still at war. And so he launches his invasion to the west, takes over France, takes over.
And of course, because Churchill and the French and the English, they didn't give him any choice, right? He had to invade the west because of this. What was he going to do? The evil Churchill didn't accept his peace proposal, even though he literally launches his invasion of the west the day that Churchill becomes prime minister.
Western and Northern Europe.
the day.
Once that's done, the British have, escaped at Dunkirk. There's no British force left on the continent. There's no opposing force left on the continent. In other words, the war is over.
No, it's not.
The Germans won.
The war's not over. They didn't win.
Okay.
By what point?
Fall of 1940, right? So there's literally no opposing force on the continent.
Yeah, so everybody should just give in and let Hitler win, right? Is that what he's arguing?
And throughout that summer, Adolf Hitler is firing off radio broadcasts, giving speeches, literally sending planes over to drop leaflets over London and other British cities, trying to get the message to these people that Germany does not want to fight you.
He was such a peaceful guy. He tried everything to not fight the British. But evil dictator, evil villain, chief villain of World War II, Winston Churchill, wouldn't accept peace.
We don't want to fight you. Offering peace proposals.
Oh, a real in-depth class on World War II would be awesome.
That
I don't know if he ever actually said it, but in the movie version of Winston Churchill, he said, "You don't negotiate with a lion when your head it's in its mouth." That's true.
It said, "You keep all your overseas colonies. We don't want any of that. We want Britain to be strong. The world needs Britain to be strong."
What a guy! What a guy!
Communist threat and so forth. Like this is what's going on. And I think that if there were people in Britain who, if they hadn't put it this way, they hadn't been so successful at delegitimizing the peace approach by demonizing Neville Chamberlain and so forth.
Demonizing Neville Chamberlain, he walked around saying peace in our time, and no sooner had he said it than the things that he said he negotiated were lost. Come on, are you kidding me? They delegitimized Chamberlain's peace proposal. Come on.
And holding him responsible for the invasion of Poland.
Yeah, it was appeasement.
People would have been, they would have understood. Like, we don't need a repeat of the First World War.
You're right. We should have just let Hitler have the continent, let him massacre millions of people, let him have Aryan domination, let him take care of the Soviet threat, and the world will be a wonderful place, right? Okay, so before we go any further, I want to back up a little bit and cover some of the stuff he's been talking about, particularly this idea that Germany wanted peace and didn't really want to fight against France and Britain, and really had no plans and did everything they could to avoid it, including dropping leaflets and things like that. First of all, that ignores the Blitz, which was going on in the summer of 1940, which was bombing of the British towns and cities. It was an air war against the British home front, but also against their navy. And it also ignores the plans that Hitler himself gave in his directives to his army. So I want to start with his Führer Directive number 1 for the conduct of the war. And this was issued on the 31st of August, 1939, the day before the invasion of Poland. So there's a lot here, but among other things, he's covering the distinct likelihood of war against France and Britain, which he knows is quite possible. So one of the things he says here, number 3, is in the West, it is important to leave the responsibility for opening hostilities unmistakably to England and France. So he's anticipating that there's going to be fighting, but we need to make it look like they started it. So that's one part. But then he also talks about, he says, defensive activity of the Air Force will be restricted for the time being to the firm repulse of enemy air attacks on the frontiers of the Reich. In taking action against individual aircraft or small formations, care will be taken to respect the frontiers of neutral countries as far as possible. Only if considerable forces of French or British bombers are employed against German territory across neutral areas will the Air Force be permitted to go into defensive action over neutral soil. So he hasn't declared war on Holland, on the Netherlands, on Belgium yet. So and so he says, should England and France open hostilities against Germany, it will be the duty of the armed forces operating in the West while conserving their strength as much as possible to maintain conditions for the successful conclusion of operations against Poland. Hold off the West while we finish off Poland. Then we'll deal with them.
Right.
Then he goes on then near the bottom. I want to read this. Attacks on the English homeland are to be prepared, bearing in mind that inconclusive results with insufficient forces are to be avoided in all circumstances. He also says operations against England, the task of the Air Force is to take measures to dislocate English imports, the armaments industry, the transport of troops to France, any favorable opportunity of an effective attack on concentrated units of the English Navy, particularly battleships or aircraft carriers, will be exploited. So what he's saying is, he's not saying let's avoid fighting the British. He's like, no, our primary goal right now is Poland, but if you see an opportunity against the British, take it, and don't let them bring any troops to France. Fight them. Take out their ports. Go after their imports. Go after their battleships. This is not the work of someone who was trying to avoid war with the British at all costs.
Who would have thought that these fucking MAGA retards would be running around in 2025 saying Hitler wasn't so bad and I kind of like Putin. We should be allies with Russia.
This is someone who is accounting for all possibilities. But what I really want to look at is Directive number 6. So this is October 1939. This is a month after the invasion of Poland. This is November, December, January, February, March, April, May. 7 months before Winston Churchill becomes Prime Minister. At this point, Churchill is First Lord of the Admiralty. He takes over that job a couple of days after the invasion of Poland. So this is Directive number 6. Tell me if this sounds to you like somebody who's avoiding war with Britain and is trying at all costs to make peace with the British. Should it become evident in the near future that England and under her influence France also are not disposed to bring the war to an end, I have decided without further loss of time to go over to the offensive. Any further delay will not only entail the end of Belgian and perhaps of Dutch neutrality to the advantage of the Allies, it will also increasingly strengthen the military power of the...
Hey, there's a really good movie where it's about these it's 2 young guys and a girl, and they all go to college together. And then one of them ends up working in England, and the other one ends up working in Germany with the girl. And like it's during the rise of Hitler. and they're going to negotiate potential peace deal. But there's actually some Hitler's actually building forces and planning an attack in the background, and the two friends who are now like estranged over Hitler and shit end up coming together to get this information to the British and give it. What's the name of that movie? You know what I'm talking about? Did I do a bad job explaining it? Oh, it's just called Munich. Munich, The Edge of War. Have you guys seen that movie? It's pretty good.
The enemy, reduce the confidence of neutral nations in Germany's final victory, and make it more difficult to bring Italy into the war on our side as a full ally. Therefore, I issue the following orders for further conduct of military operations. An offensive will be planned on the northern flank of the Western Front through Luxembourg, Belgium, and Holland. This offensive must be launched at the earliest possible moment and in the greatest possible strength. The purpose of this offensive will be to defeat as much as possible of the French army and of the forces of the Allies fighting on their side, and at the same time to win as much territory as possible in Holland, Belgium, and northern France, to serve as a base for the...
It's not Churchill. It's not supposed to be Churchill. It is the guy that we were just talking about a second ago, Neville Chamberlain. And he wanted peace, 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 all peace, peace, peace. And he had to confront the fact that Germany was preparing for war, not peace. They might have been saying, hey, we want to do peace, we want to do this, we want to do that. Yeah, probably Netflix. But yes, it is on Netflix. But he was actually preparing to go to war with everybody.
Successful prosecution of the air and sea war against England.
And it's the reason I think I liked it is because, like, when we're talking about Trump, they're a group of friends. They're educated. They hang out together. They talk to each other. They have a falling out because two of the friends are like, what that Hitler guy's fucking saying is pretty crazy. And the other guy's like, you don't understand. He just wants Germany to be Germany, right? I shouldn't have to apologize for being German. I should be able to. It sounds so much like Trump supporters. Like, I'm not racist. I just think they should all go to their own country. And there's nothing wrong with being white. Is there? Like, it reminds me of the rise of Trump.
And is a wide protective area for the economically vital Ruhr Basin. And so he's talking about then the timing of this and how we need to do it when we have the biggest advantage possible. The Air Force will prevent attacks by the Anglo-French Air Forces on our army and will give all necessary direct support to its advance. The timing of it all will depend on the readiness for action of armored and motorized units involved. He's not saying we're trying to deal with peace, and if that fails, only then will we have to do this. No, he's saying let's make plans to do this at our earliest advantageous position. Apart from these preparations for the beginning of the offensive in the West, according to plan, the Army and Air Force must be ready at all times at increasing strength to meet Anglo-French invasion of Belgium immediately as far forward as possible on Belgian soil. And so he says these preparations will be camouflaged in such a way that they appear to be merely precautionary measures made necessary by the threatening increase in the strength of the French and English forces on the frontier. So we're going to make it look like we're just protecting ourselves, but really we're preparing for an invasion. That does not sound like a guy who just wants peace.
We don't, which is not what ended up happening, but that's what everybody thought was going to happen. And so Churchill, you have a guy, Churchill wanted a war. He wanted to fight Germany. And the reason that I don't begrudge him that, people can national leaders, you can fight whoever you want. If you feel like your the long-term interests of the British Empire are threatened by the rise of a powerful continental power like Germany, and you need to check that, those are great power games. And
it's not a power game. They had a defensive agreement with Poland to protect the integrity of Poland as a country against German aggression. And they honored that agreement.
Play them the way you feel like you need to play them. That's fine. The reason I resent Churchill so much for it is that he kept this war going when he had no way to go back and fight this war. All he had were bombers.
Just watch. Thank you.
By 1940, Churchill didn't even become prime minister until May of 1940. And again, it happened at the same moment Germany was invading France and Belgium and the Netherlands. This was not something that was going on after Churchill became prime minister.
Sending bomber fleets to go firebomb the Black Forest, just to burn down sections of the Black Forest, just rank terrorism.
It's not rank terrorism, it's war.
Going through and starting to what eventually became just the carpet bombing, saturation bombing of civilian neighborhoods. To kill the purpose of which was to kill as many civilians as possible.
So here's my question about that, and I'm not arguing otherwise that civilians didn't suffer terribly on this war, and that there was a lot of bombing, firebombing of Dresden that happens late in the war, for example. But here's my question: in an industrial, and this is a question, I'm not making an argument, in an industrial war where your ability to make make aggressive war on other nations is dependent on your industry and the amount of tanks and planes and other weapons that you can produce on a mass scale, in that scenario, who is a civilian? Because you can't make that war without the hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of civilians in these factories doing that.
And all the men were out in the field. All the fighting age men were out in the field. And so it's old people, it's women and children, and they knew that, and they were wiping these places out. It was gigantic, scaled terrorist attacks.
And what was the German Luftwaffe doing in the summer of 1940, if not bombing civilians?
Scale of terrorist attacks you've ever seen in world history.
Why would he do that?
Because it was the only means that they...
It's like the right propels these idiots to the forefront. Like, Joe Rogan's a fucking idiot, dude. Like, I get it. He's good at talking to people. He's a fucking idiot. He's dumb.
They had to continue fighting at the time. They didn't have the ability to...
So the leader of a country that was at war used every means at his disposal to win the war. That's what he's saying.
Invade Europe. And so he needed to keep this war going until he accomplished what he hoped to accomplish. We know now there's actually a really great series of books. It's one of the best. I recommend it to everybody, but it's really expensive now. And it's 6 long volumes called History of British Special Operations in the Second World War. And one of the books gets into the level of just the extent of media operations, propaganda operations, everything that they were running in the United States to eventually drag us into that war.
Well, that makes total sense. And what was Germany doing at all this time, except also running media and propaganda operations? He makes it sound like this stuff was happening in a vacuum, and that all of the things that happened were Churchill's responsibility. That Churchill was the one who made Germany invade Poland, take the Sudetenland, take Czechoslovakia, take Austria, the deaths of millions of Soviet prisoners of war. Well, I mean, it was mercy killing, right? It was, what choice did he have? And then he starts bombing Germany because he can't actually go.
If you get a chance to watch Munich, The Edge of War, go watch it.
And
it's on Netflix.
Their allies like France and Belgium and the Netherlands and Poland with land troops because the British don't have a massive land army.
And that was his whole plan.
You would think that he would retain some knowledge, but he sometimes has guests on 6 months apart that claim the exact opposite from each other, and he doesn't even remember that.
His whole plan was we don't have a way to fight this war ourselves. This war's over.
No, that's what you do. You're facing the tyranny of the Nazi regime over continental Europe, and you know that things are happening there that need to be dealt with, and that this menace of Germany needs to be rolled back. And you are desperate to bring in the big, when you're facing a bully, you need to go get a bigger bully to deal with them. And of course he needed the United States. Why are we making it sound like this was some evil act on the part of Churchill to get the United States involved in this war? Franklin Roosevelt wanted the U.S. involved in the war too, but he was in a situation where the U.S. Public sentiment was against the war, and so they weren't in a place yet to do that.
The Soviet Union or the United States to do it for us, and that was the plan, and kept the war going long enough for that plan to come to fruition. And to me, it's a craven, ugly way to fight a war. And
what was the motive?
This is insanity. Absolute insanity. See that smile? That smile betrays the fact that there's some conspiracy theories shooting around in this tiny pea-sized brain of his about why Churchill would do this. I guarantee you what he thought in that moment was it was the Jews, but he's not going to say that.
Churchill's got a complicated history. I mean, he's somebody who...
That was the wryest smile I think I've ever seen.
Yeah.
Say what you think.
Well,
you've been doing it so far.
I think on one level, there was a sense that Churchill was sort of humiliated by his performance in the First World War.
Wait, so World War II happened because Churchill was humiliated by Gallipoli. Is that what we're saying here?
He was the head of the Admiralty, and he was out in the cold for a long time.
I mean, Gallipoli.
Yeah, and which that was his operation.
Yeah.
And so he was rightly held responsible for that, and seen as responsible for one of the great disasters that the British suffered during that war.
It continues to amaze me how we focus so much on Gallipoli. So, for example, Australia and New Zealand, obviously, Anzac Day is based on the invasion of Gallipoli, which was a complete disaster. And yet, the Australians suffered as many casualties in the span of a few weeks at Poitiers during the Somme offensive as they did in the entire nearly, 8 months or so of Gallipoli. But we don't talk about that. The Somme was way bigger a disaster than Gallipoli was.
And so I think part of it's probably kind of personal. He wanted redemption. He wanted to go out there and prove that he's the warlord.
So what exactly is happening in the time between September 1939 and May 1940 when Churchill is not prime minister that could indicate that Churchill was the one who kept this war going in order to get personal glory for himself?
They can go out there and fight this big war. Probably. I think
probably. There you go. Can we just for a second acknowledge that it wasn't like Churchill was doing this all by himself either? The majority of his cabinet was in favor of continuing this war. The sentiment of the British people was to stand and to be defiant and stand up against tyranny. It's not like Churchill all by himself dragged Britain kicking and screaming into war with Germany.
Part of it, I read about Churchill, and he strikes me as a psychopath.
Psychopath? Oh my gosh.
But he's also a sort of, he was a drunk. He was very childish in strange ways. People
You're very childish.
Talk about how, as an adult, as prime minister, they'd find him in his room and he's playing with action figures like war toys and army men and stuff, and would get mad when people would interrupt him, when he was doing this. This is a strange fellow, There's all those things.
What's that got to do with anything?
But then you get into, why was Winston Churchill such a dedicated booster of Zionism from early?
There you go. Remember I said a minute ago when he smiled and I said what was bouncing around in his mind was it was the Jews. And now he finally admits it. That's what this is all about, is that at the end of the day, it's about the Jews. And that's all the answer you need as to where this guy's mind is.
He wanted his life, right? And there's ideological reasons. Like in 1920, he wrote a kind of infamous now article called Zionism versus Bolshevism. And he basically makes the case that, which was true to a large extent, that all of Eastern Europe, the Pale of Settlement, which is where the vast majority of Jews lived, other than the United States, which is where a lot of them had traveled to, that area had become so engulfed by a revolutionary spirit that all the
rebellious Jews, it's their fault. My God, this guy is absolutely insane. He's dangerous, is what he is.
Ashkenazi Jews who were over there were getting swept up into it. It was the 60s here on steroids, right, in a much more serious and ended up being destructive way. And this is 1920, so this is shortly after the Bolshevik Revolution. Basically, the point of his paper is he says these people who are over there, they're all going one direction or the other. They're going to be Bolsheviks. They're going to be Zionists. We want them to be Zionists, and so we need to support this. And so that was early on. There's an ideological component of it. But then as time goes on, you read stories about Churchill going bankrupt and needing money, getting bailed out by people who shared his interests.
So, to summarize, World War II happened because Churchill was a psychopath who played with toy soldiers, who needed revenge for what happened at Gallipoli, who was broke, who supported the Zionist Jews, and Hitler was just trying to make peace. And darn Churchill wouldn't let it happen and even drag the United States into his
those darn Jews
scheme as well.
In terms of Zionism, but also his hostility, I think his
Did you just flash a white power sign? No, I know he didn't, but
hostility to put it this way, I think his hostility to Germany was real. I don't think that he necessarily had to be bribed to have that feeling. But I think he was, to an extent, put in place by people, the financiers.
They're, again, read Jews. They put him in power. The rich Jew, it was the Rothschilds. They put Churchill in power. They're the ones responsible for this war. Yeah, that's it.
By a media complex that wanted to make sure that he was the guy who was representing Britain in that conflict for a reason.
That's where he gets his information from. That's how horrible it is. I don't know. It's fucked up that this is what we've turned to now. That this is where we find ourselves. That let's be friends with Russia and Hitler wasn't that bad. Here's the video I was talking about the other night where Elizabeth Warren has to lay the law down to CNBC hosts. Listen to this.
It ultimately doesn't matter. What do you mean it ultimately doesn't matter? This is the law. It's kind of Constitution 101. He has the authority, ultimately. Well, no, he does not.
They're talking about Trump. The only reason that he's able to do the things he's doing is because he's declaring national emergencies. They're like, he has the authority to stop all this funding. No, he doesn't. Congress passes a law. Congress has the purse strings. They say what the laws are and where the money's going. And then Trump is supposed to execute those.
It ultimately doesn't matter. What do you mean it ultimately doesn't matter? This is the law. I'm still kind of Constitution 101. No, but he has the authority, ultimately. Well, no, he does not. That's the whole point. He does.
Thank you for the follow.
The authority if Congress does not let him keep this authority. We can take this away.
Can I get
declared an emergency. That's what gives him the authority. Otherwise, it belongs to Congress. Instead of just mouthing off about what you think is happening, actually present some evidence. And let's look at the evidence. Let's let the other side come in and question that evidence. But you don't just get to lip off and say, and therefore the king gets to wave his magic wand and say, off with your head.
Doesn't the government determine where federal tax dollars go?
Yes. Yes, Congress does.
And so they're allowed to decide. Do you think they have a big bushel basket of money and they just say, you good looking, you will have money. You not so good looking, you're going to have to go hungry for a while. That's not how it works. Let's just do Con Law 101, and that is Congress writes those laws and allocates that money. The administration's job is to enforce those laws and spend that money the way.
That's why there's literally a law against him impounding the money. Because Congress could pass whatever they want. Let's say Congress gets together and passes a law that's going to fund new businesses, and for some reason it's businesses Trump doesn't like. Congress passes it, it's in the budget, the money's appropriated, they send it to the president. Let's say he even vetoes it, but it comes back to Congress and they override his veto. We can't have a guy in the chain that can just say, nope, Congress, I'm just suspending this forever. He can't impound the money. He can't redirect the money. He can't shut down these things that the money's going to that Congress has already appropriated the funds for and passed the laws for.
the law tells them, and if they fail to do that, part 3 is the courts are the ones who step in and enforce the law.
It ultimately doesn't matter.
What do you mean it ultimately doesn't matter? This is...
I also don't think that any Trump supporter understands that immigration courts are not Article 3. They're not judicial courts. They're not under the judicial branch. They're under the president. And Abrego Garcia got his withholding order under Trump, under the Trump administration. I don't think I don't think they could comprehend that. I don't know. I don't know. What do you guys got going on? You got anything you want to talk about? What's been bothering you all lately? Besides Tim Pool and Ian Carroll and all the things that bother me. I hope they bother you too. They keep you up at night. Daryl Cooper, dude. Everything. It's pretty bad, huh? It's pretty bad. I saw Rhett came out and did this with Alex O'Connor. This has been a trending video. Why he left Christianity. You know Rhett and Link from the Good and Mythical Morning or whatever? They're really famous. They did a bunch of viral videos and ads and shit. Rhett and Link were both like hardcore, worked in the Christian ministry thing all the way up to their youth. And honestly, their original content plan was to make videos that were funny and comedic, but drove people to Christianity. Drove people back to Christianity. That was their original plan. Until they kind of got out of their shell. They were in college and started seeing some more stuff and some things that just didn't jive with the Christian faith. So then they began basically questioning everything. That's what drove them out. Alex O'Connor is a philosophy guy, and Rhett goes on there. It's actually really good. If it's something you want to watch. What else has been good lately? Not much, honestly. Not much. Everything's been shit, and that's why it's all falling apart. I don't know what to tell you. Life's kind of sucked lately. So I don't know if I can approve. The Pope died. I guess I could tell you that. Everybody thinks that that Katy Perry and them really didn't go to space because they opened the door early, and they didn't want the door open. They wanted it like a big reveal moment. So they closed the door back, then they let Jeff Bezos open the door. There is a non-zero chance that J.D. Vance killed the Pope. So there's that. Let's grab this one while we're sitting here. Oh, Pete Hegseth, in his drunken glory, only shaved one sideburn off. He only shaved one fucking sideburn off. That is not a joke. He literally shaved one fucking sideburn. Hold on, I'll grab it for you.
I need to show you something completely insane. He is such a drunk that he has a sideburn on this side, but not on this.
Oh shit, I didn't realize this was up. Sorry.
This is the man in charge of our military. I need to show you something completely insane. He is such a drunk that he has a sideburn on this side, but not on this side. This is the man in charge of our military. I need to show you something completely insane.
He has one sideburn on one side of his face. But no sideburn on. How drunk, how hungover do you have to be, I guess? Maybe he's not drunk. He sounds unhinged when he's talking. Here's his response.
Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth created another signal messaging chat that included his wife and brother, where he shared similar details of a March military airstrike against Yemen's Houthi militants that were sent in another chain with top.
Sorry, it's taking a second to load.
Secretary Pete Hegseth created another signal messaging chat that included his wife and brother, where he shared similar details of a March military airstrike against Yemen's Houthi militants that were sent in another chain with top Trump administration leaders. The New York Times on Sunday reported the second chat, and a person familiar with the contents and those who received the messages confirmed it to the Associated Press. According to Associated Press on Monday, at the White House Easter egg roll, Secretary Hegseth responded, placing blame on the media. See, this is what the media does.
Oh shit, hold on.
Anonymous sources from disgruntled former...
It's not going to be him talking anyways. I'll find a clip of him talking. This one maybe. It's not long.
Happy Easter egg roll, sir.
Hey, we're happy to be here at the Easter egg roll, I'll tell you that. Be with the family, beautiful day. And President Trump is changing the country. And he's creating opportunities for families all across America to better their lives. And that's what Make America Great Again is all about.
What do you want to say, sir, about the signal chat controversy?
You know, what a big surprise that a bunch of, a few leakers get fired and suddenly a bunch of hit pieces come out from the same media that peddled the Russia hoax. Won't give back their Pulitzers. They got Pulitzers for a bunch of lies. Pulitzers for a bunch of lies and on hoaxes, time and time and time again. And as they peddle,
I don't know what he's done to his sideburns. They look bad.
see, this is what the media does. They take anonymous sources from
Dude, he's got like 8 fucking kids.
disgruntled former employees, and then they try to slash and burn people and ruin their reputations. Not going to work with me.
Look at his kids' faces. That's the biggest takeaway from this entire video. Look at his fucking kids' faces. Look at this kid right here. He's like, what the fuck? What the fuck are we doing here, Dad?
Because we're changing the Defense Department, putting the Pentagon back in the hands of warfighters, and anonymous smears from disgruntled former employees on old news doesn't matter. So I'm happy to be here at the Easter egg roll with my dad and my kids, because this is what we're doing it for. These kids right here. This is why we're fighting the fake news media. This is why we're fighting slash and burn Democrats. This is why we're fighting hoaxers. This group, this group right here, full of hoaxers that peddle anonymous sources from leakers with access to grind, and then you put it all together as if it's some news story. And when we know exactly what it is. So I'm really proud of what we're doing.
Look at that fact. Look at his kids' faces, dude. I can tell you right now that kid's got irritable bowel syndrome, and it's 100% brought on from his dad.
For the president, fighting hard across the board, and I'm going to go roll some Easter eggs with my kids. Thank you very much.
Have you spoken to the president?
I have spoken to the president, and we are going to continue fighting on the same page all the way. Let's go.
All right, before we get too far out of base here, we got some documents. Phil Godlewski ruling versus Bree, actually. You ready? It's a long one. Strap in. Incident matter arises from the allegations of defamation, publicity to private life invasion of privacy and false light invasion of privacy relating to an affidavit signed by Bree for an underlying case, Godlewski v. Kelly, Lackawanna County, common pleas, blah, blah, blah. Phil Godlewski filed his complaint against Bree, and Bree filed an answer with new matter, counterclaim, alleging defamation, false light invasion of privacy, assault, battery, intentional infliction of emotional distress, IED, and negligent infliction of emotional distress, NIED. Both parties filed motions for partial summary judgment. So both Phil and Bree are trying to get partial summary judgment now that all the evidence and stuff submitted. Godlewski's complaint makes the following allegation on October 31st. Bree signed an affidavit prepared by or at the discretion of attorney Timothy J. Hinton. In the affidavit, Bree alleges that she commenced a sexual relationship with Phil Godlewski in late 2008, early 2009, while Bree was 15 years old. Bree asserts that she had sex multiple times with Godlewski, who was 10 years older than she, while she was in the 9th and 10th grades at Riverside High. Bree asserts in the affidavit that Phil was charged with crimes relating to their sexual relationship in July 2010. Bree also asserts that she resumed a sexual relationship with Godlewski in 2014-2016. Godlewski was charged with 1 count of corruption of minors by an information filed on November 16, 2010, Lackawanna docket number. The information alleged Phil did repeatedly have inappropriate text message and contact with a minor. Phil entered a plea of guilty at Lackawanna County to 1 count of corruption of minors. Phil alleges that the affidavit signed by Bree is defamatory, invades Phil's privacy by casting Phil in a false light to the public, and invades Phil's privacy by giving publicity to Phil's private life. Additionally, Phil alleges he has suffered special harm in the form of damage to his reputation and character. Phil seeks compensatory, nominal, and punitive damages, along with equitable relief sufficient to prevent similar future conduct by Bree and counsel fees. A motion for summary judgment is a request that the court enter judgment without trial because there is no genuine issue of material fact. So basically, a summary judgment looks at the evidence and says there's no disagreement here. There's no issue here, so we're just going to award it this way or we're going to award it this way. Phil Godlewski is a huge QAnon guy that we cover sometimes on the show. We used to cover him pretty regularly. He's a multimillionaire off QAnon shit. Turns out while he was screaming, "Save the kids," he was also a pretty disgusting guy in his hometown when he was a baseball coach. And according to all of this, had sex with a 15-year-old that went to the school where he coached, Riverside High. So basically, a summary judgment means there's no issues here. We all agree. Discussion. Phil's motion for partial summary judgment. Courts are required to examine pleadings as a whole to determine whether a defendant has admitted the material factual allegations of a complaint. Accordingly, courts are also required to examine the pleadings as a whole in determining whether the defendant has admitted the material fact allegations of a complaint. Phil raises a near exact replica of his argument from his motion for judgment on the pleadings, which we already denied, June 24, 2024, memorandum in order of the plaintiff's motion for judgment on the pleadings. Our findings remain the same. The subject paragraphs at issue state the following. Denied as stated, the affidavit attached to Godlewski's complaint is a writing the terms of which speak for itself. Denied. Strict proof of the allegations demanded at the time of trial. Denied as stated, the affidavit attached to plaintiff's complaint is a writing the terms of which speak for itself. Denied. Oh, okay. Each of these paragraphs, when read in conjunction with the entire answer and the referenced exhibits, as we must pursuant to Curzon, does not in any way state that Bree admits to Phil's allegations. Phil argues the phrase denied as averred and responses asserting that a document speaks for itself are unsupported general denials. However, Phil does not cite to a single legal authority where the phrase denied as stated or denied as averred has held to be legally insufficient response. Further, each of the cases Godlewski relies on, which supposedly found that a response asserting a document speaks for itself was unsupported, general denial, are distinguishable. In each of these cases Godlewski relies on, the document asserted to speak for itself failed to specify, deny, or contest. So basically, Phil was citing cases where the people said this document speaks for itself and saying, she can't say that. She can't do that in court. That doesn't count. You can't say the document speaks for itself. But the cases that he was citing said the document speaks for itself, but the document didn't speak for itself. He wasn't a teacher. No, he wasn't. The baseball coach. But the document didn't speak for itself. So his lawyers are citing cases incorrectly. In contrast, in the instant matter, each of the documents that Bree asserts speaks for itself does specifically deny or contest the factual allegations contained in Phil's complaint. Only where there is no genuine issue as to any material fact, and it is clear that the moving party is entitled to a judgment as a matter of law, will summary judgment be entered. And because we find Bree's denial sufficient, genuine issue of the material fact exists. So basically, his lawyers cited the case wrong, okay? He is a real piece of shit. He's a multimillionaire. Like, he owns, like, multiple houses in Italy, a couple houses in Hawaii, houses all over the U.S., basically off selling QAnon bullshit. But we knew about it for a long time, that he had these charges in his past. And then, to talked to Will Sommer and a couple other people, and the Daily Beast, the Rolling Stones, all these people wrote articles about him. If you just Google Phil Godlewski Phil Godlewski minor, you can see all the background on him. He denies it, says that her boyfriend committed suicide and he was just trying to comfort her, and then she was just like clingy or something. But there's like text messages where he's like, I just pulled your hair out of my crotch. Like really, really fucked up text messages. A 15-year-old dude. The parents busted him. Accordingly, Godlewski's motion for partial summary judgment regarding this issue will be denied. Statute of limitations. The law of the case doctrine refers to family of rules which embody the concept that a court involved in the later phases of litigated matters should not reopen questions decided by another judge of that same court or a higher court in early phases of the court. However, where motions differ in kind, as preliminary objections differ from motions for judgment on the pleadings, which differ from motions for summary judgment, a judge ruling on a later motion is not precluded from granting relief through another judge, although another judge has denied an earlier motion. Bree argues we are bound by the previous decision of this court on Godlewski's motion for judgment on the pleadings. Because a motion for partial summary judgment differs in kind from a motion for judgment on the pleadings, we are not bound by the conclusions contained in the previous decision of this court on Godlewski's motion for judgment on the pleadings. Nevertheless, Godlewski's arguments remains virtually the same. So basically, he tried filing this twice, and both times they're like, no, as those used at the preliminary objection stage. Phil contends that Bree claims for assault, battery, IIED, and NIED are barred. So basically, I guess I left this out. Phil sued a paper that wrote a story about him, the Scranton Times. He lost. He's like, they're calling me a pedophile. I never had sex with her. This is all. And he tried to get Bree to work with him to perjure herself to win the case. But he lost, and all that came out because Bree did an affidavit for his opponent, the newspaper, and said, we did have sex, and here's the text messages. When she worked with the paper to clear her name as not this clingy, obsessed person, then Phil sued her as well. I guess I should have included that. That all these claims are barred by appropriate statute of limitations because there is no forcible compulsion. The Pennsylvania legislature amended the statute of limitations for victims of child sexual abuse by extending the statute of limitations from age of majority, 18 years old, plus 12 years of age of majority, plus 37 years. The following actions and proceedings must be commenced within 2 years: an action for assault, battery, abuse of process, any other action or proceeding to recover damages for injury or person or property which is found on negligent, intentional, or otherwise tortuous conduct, or any other action proceeding to sound blah, blah, blah. Godlewski argues that Bree's counterclaim fails to sufficiently plead forcible compulsion, and thus the applicable statute of limitations is a 2-year time period set forth in 5524, and not the 18 years plus age of age plus 37 years set forth in 5533. This argument lacks merit. As noted in 5533, sexual intercourse and indecent contact qualify as forcible compulsion. So basically, Phil was saying, even if she was telling the truth, she hasn't claimed that I forced her, that I used forcible compulsion on her. So she only had 2 years for statute of limitations. But if you read the law like we did, in cases of sexual intercourse and indecent contacts, that automatically qualifies as forcible compulsion under Pennsylvania law. So she gets the 18 years of age plus 37 years to file. While only one of these two are needed for forcible compulsion to be president, Bree's counterclaim sufficiently pleads both of these. Specifically, paragraphs 1, 2, 4, 8, 11, 55, 57, and 69 in the counterclaim make multiple averments of sexual intercourse between Godlewski and Bree. That a child under the age of 16 cannot consent. Stating that a child under the age of 16 cannot consent. Stating that consent is impossible when there is a power imbalance such as school employee-student relationship. Further, the counterclaim avers that there were acts of indecent contact between Phil and Bree. Godlewski also contends that Bree's claims for NIED are solely based upon text messages and communications and not child sexual abuse. and thus that the claims are barred by the applicable statute of limitations 5524. This argument lacks merit. Specifically, the allegation of child sexual abuse are incorporated into the counts of IIED and NIED via paragraph 67 and 81 of the counterclaim respectively. Therefore, Bree has pleaded that her counts for IIED and NIED are the result of child sexual abuse, and thus 5533 is the controlling law. Accordingly, Godlewski's motion for partial summary judgment regarding these issues will be denied. Assault and battery. Godlewski contends that Bree has failed to create a genuine issue of material fact with respect to her tort claims for assault and battery because the alleged sexual conduct was consensual. So Phil, still in this case, he doesn't admit to this sex, but he said if we had sex, if this actually happened, then it was consensual. It says felony in the second degree. It's 4 years older but less than 8 years older than the complainant. 8 years older but less than 11 years older than the complainant. Felony in the first degree. A person is volunteer, blah, blah, blah. Consent is not a defense to a violation of subsection A2. The counterclaim avers that Godlewski began a relationship with Bree when she was 15 years of age. It is well-settled law in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania that the age of consent for sexual relationships between an adult and a minor is 16 years of age. We find that genuine issue of material fact exists with respect to Bree's tort claims for assault and battery. Accordingly, Godlewski's motion for partial summary judgment regarding this issue will be denied. IIED. Godlewski first argues that when considering the text message between Bree as an adult and Godlewski on October 10, 2021, Bree did not regard the sexual contact with Godlewski as outrageous or extreme. Godlewski repeats this argument, additionally positing that Bree must not have viewed Godlewski's alleged suicide threat or numerous other miscellaneous text messages as extreme or outrageous due to later cited text messages from Bree as an adult. So he claimed he was going to kill himself, all these other things. Godlewski here misstates that legal standard for extreme and outrageous conduct, which is not a subjective standard defined by the victim's alleged perspective, but rather an objective standard of whether a reasonable person would find the conduct extreme or outrageous. I might be an extreme or outrageous guy, and you tell me something, and I don't find it extreme or outrageous because I hear it all the time in the voices in my head. But a normal person, a regular person, a reasonable person outside of me might, and that qualifies. Repeatedly citing text messages containing the alleged opinions of Bree as an adult does not alter this court's duty to find as a matter of law whether sexual contact between Godlewski, a 27-year-old at a time, and Bree, a 15-year-old at a time. By the way, when Phil first told this story, he said that she was 21 or 22 and she was 17 or 18 the first time he said it. It's changed a bunch, but still. Would consider extreme and outrageous. Additionally, the same set of text messages which Godlewski cites, along with Bree's counterclaim, which contains allegations that Godlewski engaged in acts of child, sexual, mental, and emotional abuse against her, produce a genuine issue of material fact as to whether Godlewski engaged in extreme and outrageous conduct. Godlewski next argues that Bree has failed to produce evidence of date, time, or a method of an alleged suicide threat pursuant to the requirement that a plaintiff present actual evidence in addition to pleadings to satisfy or survive the standard of summary judgment. Page 22. However, the alleged suicide threat is just one of a multitude of allegations, and Bree's lack of supporting evidence is moot in the face of the vast well of text messages supporting her claims for IIED. Godlewski then repeats an argument from his motion for judgment on the pleadings. The argument was that an allegation of intent to influence a criminal proceeding, which Bree alleges was the intent behind Godlewski's suicide threat, negates a finding. He told her if she testifies, he's going to kill himself. Godlewski claims that Bree failed to sufficiently plead intent on Godlewski's part, citing only a single text from Bree as an adult in support. We disagree. Specifically, throughout the counterclaim, Bree has alleged that Godlewski engaged in acts of child sexual, mental, and emotional abuse against her. It is quite difficult, if not impossible, for us to conclude how anyone, especially a public school employee, would believe that this conduct was not likely to result in severe emotional distress. Godlewski also argues that Bree's own statements have absolved Godlewski of any potential liability for IIED. Godlewski does not cite a single case wherein opinion statements about the supposed mental and emotional durability as a 15 or 16-year-old child made by that child later on would negate the entirety of the claim. So basically, even if she said, you don't have to worry about me. If I ever kill myself, it's not because of something you did. That doesn't matter, right? She's not allowed to make that argument, and you can't cite any case law that supports that argument. Godlewski further argues that Bree lacks an expert opinion to substantiate the alleged severe emotional distress she suffered. The Superior Court has noted all of this block of text. Our Supreme Court clearly articulated in this case that to the extent IAED is recognized by Commonwealth, recovery is limited to those cases in which competent medical evidence of emotional distress is presented by the claimant. It says, by Bree, it is undisputed by Bree that she missed the deadline to submit expert reports to substantiate her claim of IAED. And indeed, Bree does not allege that any such expert opinions or reports exist at all. In sum, although we find that multiple genuine issues of material fact exist as to whether Godlewski committed IAED against Bree, there is no dispute regarding Bree's lack of expert evidence to support her claims for emotional distress, and Bree would be unable to recover for IAED at a potential trial. Accordingly, Godlewski wins that summary. So IAED is gone. NIAED. No attempt to plead the impact rule, the zone of danger rule, or bystander rule. We agree that Bree has not pleaded the bystander rule. However, we disagree that Godlewski's assertion that Bree has not pleaded the zone of danger rule or impact rule. Regarding the zone of danger rule, Bree has pleaded throughout the counterclaim that she was the intended victim. It is quite difficult to see how she was not in the zone of danger. Regarding the impact rule, paragraph 79 and 80 of the counterclaim say that Bree suffered anxiety, depression, stress, embarrassment, humiliation, and mental discomfort, physical impact, as a result of Godlewski's conduct. Holding that persistent depression, nausea, sleep disturbance, nightmares, flashbacks, breathing difficulties, or hysterical attacks have been deemed sufficient physical manifestation of emotional suffering to support a viable claim for NIAED. Assuming, arguendo, that Bree has not sufficiently pleaded the zone of danger rule or the impact rule, she has sufficiently pleaded the special relationship rule. Specifically, the counterclaim avers that Godlewski took on the role of a grief counselor for Bree following the suicide of her boyfriend. Counterclaim at 84. Moreover, as previously stated, we are required to view the record in the light most favorable to the non-moving party, Bree. We find that a genuine issue of material fact exists as to whether Phil committed the tort of NIAED against Bree pursuant to either zone of danger, impact, or special relationship rules. Accordingly, Godlewski's motion for NIAED will be denied. So far, all Phil's won on is that the IAED is granted. Everything else is denied. Now, Bree's motion for partial summary judgment. So that was all Phil's motions. Hey, I want summary judgment. He got one. So IAED looks like it's going to be thrown out. Now, Bree's saying, I want summary judgment. Godlewski is not collaterally stopped. Bree relies on the underlying matter of Godlewski v. Kelly, which is the Scranton Times. Lackawanna Court of Common Pleas, docket number, blah, blah, blah. Specifically, Judge Nealon's August 30th, 2024 memorandum and order, which granted the motion for summary judgment of defendants Kelly and the Scranton Times, dismissing Godlewski's claims of defamation and false light invasion of privacy. In the memorandum, Judge Nealon stated, Godlewski is collaterally estopped, so he cannot deny his participation in a sexual relationship with Bree in 2010 because he's already admitted to it. He can't walk that back now when he pled guilty to corruption of minors. However, as Judge Nealon's later memorandum and order clarified, although the August 30th, 2024 memorandum used the wording that Godlewski was collaterally estopped, the doctrine of collateral estoppel and its 5 elements were never cited or expressly applied to the process. Memorandum dated September 30th, 2024 at page 12, reading the August 30th, 2024 memorandum in full reveals that in context, the phrasing was part of an explanation that Godlewski could not deny facts contained in the text messages used as evidence to secure an indictment and guilty plea for the crime of corruption of a minor. Godlewski is not collaterally estopped from denying his participation in a sexual relationship with Bree, as the elements of collateral estoppel have not been referenced nor fulfilled. Rather, Godlewski is on record admitting to the existence and validity of the following text messages, which were referenced in the affidavit of probable cause. Here's the text messages. 1, I just want you to see that I really care about you and not your body or our sex, maybe that's the only way I can. 2, the only way we'd ever be sexually satisfied is if we did it like 4 to 5 times a day. 3, I hate my penis. I don't know why the fuck that happens. You look so good and we're giving incredible head, then boom, gone. Like, what the fuck? Isn't it funny that for the rest of his life, Phil can never, ever, ever, ever again claim that this text messages, I hate my penis, is not attached to him. For the rest of his life, the I hate my penis text is attached to Phil Godlewski. He also wrote some type of day log where it says, realize that you're only 15, but quickly stop caring. I just pulled your hair from my crotch area. Haha. Should we get a jacuzzi suite? Those are also attached to him. Additionally, Bree has waived the defense of collateral estoppel. Defenses of estoppel and res judicata must be pleaded in a responsive pleading under the heading new matter. So if she wants to plead estoppel, she has to do it under new matter. A party also waives defenses not presented by preliminary objection, answer, or reply. Bree cannot raise the defense of collateral estoppel at this stage because she did not raise it in her answer or new matter. However, it is equally true that Godlewski cannot deny the existence or validity of the above text messages. Again, Phil's whole basis is that a bunch of super genius 15-year-old girls who didn't like him hacked his phone and his Verizon accounts to make it seem like he was sending sexually suggestive texts and pictures to a 15-year-old. The court says you cannot deny these text messages. I don't give a fuck what evidence you got. You can't deny them. You already admitted to them. Due to his entered guilty plea. And as the text messages are part of the record in the instant matter, we may consider them when ruling on the cross motions for partial summary judgment. Phil told me in an interview that he had a private detective that figured out all the text messages were fake and done by Bree and her 15-year-old friends. But he hasn't got to show it in court yet. It doesn't exist. Okay? It doesn't exist. Godlewski's claim for defamation. As explained above, the collateral estoppel argument, which Bree primarily relies on, cannot be used. However, the text messages used as evidence to secure Godlewski's guilty plea to corruption of a minor may be considered admitted by him. So it doesn't matter if he admits them or not, they're considered admitted. In order to establish a claim for defamation, Godlewski has the burden of proving the following: the defamation character of the communication, its publication by the defendant, its application to the plaintiff, the understanding by the recipient of its defamatory meaning, the understanding by the recipient of its intended to be applied to the plaintiff, special harm resulting to the plaintiff from its publication, abuse of a conditionally privileged occasion. Godlewski is also a public figure, as, by his own admission and uncontested in his pleadings, he reaches millions of followers with his live streams. Under Pennsylvania law, an action for defamation against a public figure must also prove actual malice in order to prevail. Actual malice requires, at minimum, that the statements were made with reckless disregard for the truth. There must be sufficient evidence to permit the conclusion that the defendant actually had a high degree of awareness of or probable falsity. Truth is a complete defense to any defamation claim. We find that no genuine issue of material facts exists as to the truth of Bree's statements in her affidavit. Godlewski in his complaint complains that he and Bree did not have a sexual relationship while he was a minor. The aforementioned text messages, which Godlewski's own guilty plea admits the validity of, reveal otherwise. Godlewski attempts to split hairs and say he was not convicted of sex offenses relating to a sexual relationship with Bree. The precise wording of Bree's affidavit states that Godlewski was charged with crimes relating to their sexual relationship. There can be no dispute that this is true, as the original criminal complaint against Godlewski charged him with statutory sexual assaults, involuntary deviant sexual intercourse, aggravated indecent assault, and the offense which Godlewski later pled guilty to, corruption of minors. Godlewski also claims Bree falsely implies that Godlewski was convicted of sex offenses with respect to Bree. Nowhere in the affidavit is the word conviction or its variants even used. And statements relating to Godlewski's criminal case, such as Bree was the minor victim in the criminal case, and Godlewski and Bree continued to communicate with each other while the criminal case was pending, are true, as seen in the court filings and evidence of text messages submitted in the instant matter. As there's no genuine dispute of material fact regarding Bree's complete defense of truth against Godlewski's defamation claim, we grant Bree's motion for partial summary judgment on Godlewski's defamation claim. So she won. She won his defamation claim. She won it. That's the big one, right? The defamation. Now, let's go to the rest of them. Phil's claim for invasion of privacy and false light. In order to maintain a claim for privacy or false light, under Pennsylvania law, a party must show the opposing party had knowledge or acted recklessly disregarding as to the falsity of the publicized matter and the false light in which other words in which the other words be placed. As explained above, it is impossible for Bree to have acted in reckless disregard as the falsity of the matter at hand because we find that the statements in Bree's affidavit are undeniably true. Since there is no dispute of material fact regarding the invalidity of Godlewski's claim for invasion of privacy, false light, we will grant. So she won false light, she won defamation. Bree's claim for defamation and false light. So her claim against him. In order to establish a claim, you need all these things. Additionally, in order to maintain a claim for false light, invasion of privacy under Pennsylvania law, a party must show the opposing party had knowledge of or acted in reckless disregard as to the falsity of publicized matter and the false light in which the other would be placed. Although certain statements which Godlewski made on his live streams are admitted by Godlewski, Godlewski contests the falsity of the alleged defamatory statements, including statements that Bree committed serious sexual misconduct, that Bree is a liar, that the affidavit given was a false statement, and that Bree lied to police. Therefore, an issue of material fact exists regarding Bree's counterclaims for the defamation of invasion of privacy, false light. We will therefore deny. So this needs to go to court. This still needs to go to court. It's not going to be summary judgment. Her claim for assault and battery. Godlewski contends that Bree's claim for assault and battery are barred by the appropriate statute of limitations because there's no forcible compulsion. However, as explained infra above and noted in 5533, sexual intercourse and indecent contact qualifies for forcible compulsion. While only one of these two are needed for forcible compulsion to be present, Bree's counterclaim sufficiently pleads both. Specifically, paragraphs 1, 2, 4, 8, 11, 55, 557, 6, 9. In the counterclaim, make multiple averments of sexual intercourse between Godlewski and Bree, stating that a child. Further, the counterclaim avers that there were acts of indecent contact between Phil and Bree. Additionally, as explained above, Godlewski himself has admitted to the validity of the text message revealing sexual relationship and sexual contact between himself and a non-consenting minor. Godlewski also contends that Bree has failed to create genuine issues of material fact with respect to her tort claims for assault and battery because an alleged sexual conduct was consensual. We completely disagree. As explained above, a minor cannot consent to sexual conduct, and alternatively, there could be no consent in a relationship with power imbalance, such as a student-teacher relationship. We therefore find that no genuine issue of material fact exists as regards to Bree's counterclaims for assault and battery, and we will grant Bree's motion for partial summary judgment on her counterclaim for assault and battery. Boom. She won the assault and battery. Conclusion. For the above reasons, Phil's motion for partial summary judgment will be granted in part. He won that one part, the IIED, okay? He gets that thrown out. It doesn't go to court. Everything else against him goes to court. And denied to all others. Additionally, Bree's motion for partial summary judgment will be granted in part regarding Godlewski's claim for defamation, gone. Invasion of privacy, false light, gone. Her counterclaim for assault and battery, approved, and the other ones are denied. So her other ones that still need to go to court, right? So she Phil is fucked, dude. Phil is fucked. And I don't know if you guys know this, but Phil, I haven't really been mentioning it here. I've been waiting for a reading. On April 29th, 1 week from today, 1 week from today, Phil's lawyers are going in front of the Superior Court of Pennsylvania to argue for Phil's appeal. Is he going to win? Abso-fucking-lutely not. Dude, he admitted to fucking everything. He's already admitted to everything. The only thing they've got is that the judge mentioned the collateral estoppel, kind of not in the right context, but basically he can't deny the text messages. He already admitted the text messages were his. He already admitted and pled guilty, and of course it has to do with sex. You were arrested for having sex with a 15-year-old, you fucking idiot. Phil thinks, this is how Phil thinks. Phil thinks that because he had all these charges so here's the case. Phil had all these charges that were about sex with a minor. He convinced Bree not to testify against him. She come up and said, I plead the fifth, and walked out. Right? So because of that, Phil just thought he would get away with everything. He did not. He still had to get his plea deal, he had to plead guilty to corruption of minors for inappropriate contact with minors. Text messages and contact with minors. Phil thinks he can spin that into, oh, I shouldn't have been texting her because I'm old and she was young. Inappropriate text messages and contact with minors is not just texting, how was your day? Oh, it sucks your boyfriend killed himself. Like, obviously, you guys are sending the text message that you already agreed to that you sent about her hair in your crotch and meeting up and your sexual appetite not being satisfied and getting a jacuzzi with a 15-year-old. You fucking retard. Phil's fucked, dude. He should have never, ever, and it's stupid. The newspaper didn't sue him. Phil, before he was rich, crowdfunded money to sue the newspaper. And it has brought out all of this shit and blasted it all over the fucking news and cost him hundreds of thousands of dollars to defend. And he's losing every fucking step of the way. So that's the only good news. That's the only bright spot. That's the only thing we got going on, guys. I hope it was as good for you as it was for me. I feel like I need to smoke a cigarette after. Thank you guys for joining us. Thank you for being here. Please, please, please consider supporting the show. Tough times here in Tennessee. If you want to support the show, you can do that at coldbeer.fund. We would greatly appreciate it. If you can't, you can't share and like the show, though, if you can. And other than that, I'll be back tomorrow. Good to see you guys. I hope that some federal agent is watching our show and that we all get sent to the same concentration camp, because I didn't want to announce this just yet because I wasn't certain, but now I am. I will be performing stand-up at our concentration camp Tuesdays and Thursdays nights at 5 p.m. So Tuesdays and Thursdays, 5 p.m. at our concentration camp. Hope you get picked with me. There's a 3-drink minimum, and make sure you tip well to your staff because they're all forced labor. Thank you guys for joining us. Thank you for being here. I'll see you on the next one. Have a good night. Support the show at coldbeer.fund, and we'll see you on the next one.
But I can tell you this about if this douchebag.
It's official.
This particular show.
I've got a little soapbox I'm going to stand on and everything. I am no good at forced labor. I'm kind of crazy. So instead, I'll be doing stand-up.
They are, and telling the rest of the world who they are. You don't have to forfeit.
Yeah, you can send bits if you want. A lot of people don't like them because they get charged extra for them. But yeah, I get bits. I'm an affiliate.
I think I started some shit. Piss him off, it's about to get lit. Get the place. You sure about that?
Oh shit.
You sure about that?
That's an alert you set off.
Sure about that?
I'm sure about it. Thank you very much for the bits. I appreciate it.
You sure about that? 6 cents for the stupid shit.
Thank you.
Y'all need Jesus. Praise the Lord, head to the extreme. All these false fucking prophets who profit off of gossip. Worshipping drums, cocking, begging for a throat deposit. Swinging fucking meat hammers like fool in a thong. He's strapped to the shaft, eating his chest like he's King Kong. Starving for attention, I'ma make your gut burst. I'll be your huckleberry, I can quench that thirst. Baby eating lizard people, alien sex. What's next? Trump in a dress, fucking Flynn on his desk. A retard in a vest, climbing up 5G towers, cause you told him if he did, he'd get fucking superpowers. Here we go, I think I started some shit. It's the month, it's about to get lit. Get the place.
I should have kept supporting Trump and kept my audience. We were making decent money then. I didn't have to fucking bring it up 3 times a show for donations and shit. If I could have just bit the bullet and been a grifter, I probably could have been one of the best. Tell him I'm a secret agent working for Trump. I'm at Mar-a-Lago. I could have come up with all kinds of shit.
Open his closet, I found some of his meat rockets. I strapped them to my shoes and then I flew through the roof. I found myself in orbit strapped to an F-16.
Pesky morals get in the way of everything.
Put on a light coat of baby oil and saluted the troops. He tapped me on the shoulder and said, "This is gonna be it." Whoa, wait. Stop. What? What? I'll get my files. Wait, what are you doing? Stop. Hold on. Fucking stop. Dude, come on. Seriously. My mom's an alcoholic. Give me oh my God. Damn it. Here we go.
We already did that. And I donated all the money like a fucking retard. You guys don't remember Nick Swick? Were you around when we did Nick Swick? Michael Roberts? I had a whole separate persona that we did, and we started a new YouTube channel just with my Patreon members. And I'll have to tell the story next time I'm live. Remind me about Nick Swick. Like Nothing Can Stop What Is Coming, NCS, WIC. That was Nick Swick was the name I came up with. I'll tell you the story next time I'm live. It made a few $100s. I donated it all to people in need because I felt bad, but that's just because I'm dumb. Even Phil mentioned me. Yeah, no one knew. All right, we'll see you guys. I can't tell the story tonight. It's too late. Have a good night.